Then do you know where my dear husband is? Black Horse, he needs to go to my dear husband quickly. The Hell Horse shook his head again. It was possible to find out if he wanted to, but to do so he needed to exit out of this space. He became deflated again. I have to go to my dear husband. If not, my dear husband could be in danger. Neighing. Only then the Hell Horse showed some curiosity. At any rate, the Kingslayer said to diligently assist Mu-young. However, as a matter of fact, even without his aid, that monster-like jerk would live as he pleased. As he became stronger each day, he should be able to even capture the demon gods. However, Wuhi's concern was sincere. Finally getting up from the place, Wuhi lowered her shoulders. Diablo was said to be a very dangerous demon god. Wuhi's mom said so. Wuhi's mom is the queen of the fairies? So, she knows a lot that even Wuhi doesn't know. The Hell Horse patiently kept his cool. It was an unspoken gesture, instructing her to continue to explain. So, you know what? It was strange that Diablo has been summoned. Diablo is a god that should not exist in the first place. So, unless he is destroyed as soon as possible, something called the end of the world will come. The end of the world. They were the words that signified the destruction of the world. The Hell Horse flared his nostrils. It did not have much to do with him. Whether the demon world was to be destroyed or not, all that he needed was to continue to live comfortably with all the unicorns. Without Wuhi and the one who summoned Diablo, it was said that my dear husband would not be able to defeat him. But Wuhi's dad also said something different. The most important issue was the Masters of Darkness. The reason for Diablo's ability to maintain himself was because he had eaten the Masters of Darkness or something. The Masters of Darkness. Kingslayer was one of them. The true master of the Hell Horse. He was one of the Masters of Darkness who had drowned in the darkness. Would Diablo even consider Kingslayer as a prey? However, Kingslayer was strong. Even the true gods could not provoke Kingslayer. The Hell Horse knew that very well. So, the Masters of Darkness. It was said that there will be someone who will offer them up. If the darkness collapses with Diablo eating up the Masters of Darkness, there will be confusion in all dimensions? He doesn't understand it well, but I guess it would lead to a disaster. The darkness was the final stop for the gods that could not become gods. Solomon kept several of such beings based on contracts. Even Kingslayer was one of them. The Hell Horse stiffened up for a minute. Mu-young was someone he thought wouldn't die even if he was killed. However, Kingslayer was unexpectedly weak. Even though his power was nearly equivalent to the ordinary gods, he did have an experience of having fallen down into the darkness with despair. As he liked Mu-young a lot and it had been a favor from Kingslayer, the Hell Horse assisted Mu-young for a while. In fact, the Hell Horse's concern was over Kingslayer, rather than Mu-young. So, Wuhi has to go find my dear husband. Black Horse. Wuhi will be moving again. Goodbye. Wuhi did not even ask for help. She had the sense of responsibility to carry it out on her own. Wuhi wasn't that kind of a fairy to begin with. She had optimized skills in the areas of cunning and scheming, so that she could spend her time in comfort. That was her trait that even the Hell Horse knew, despite having spent only a few moments with her. Nei-hei-hing. The Hell Horse stepped in front of Wuhi's way. Oh, Black Horse, do you mean to tell me I can ride you? Nei-hing. The Hell Horse loudly released air through its nostrils. Then, moved by that action, Wuhi began to tear up. Although she did not make it explicit, it must have been very hard on her for a long time. Thank you. Black Horse. We got on the back of the Hell Horse. Nei-hing. Nei-hei-hing. And as they were about to leave the space, hundreds of unicorns followed behind. Even the Hell Horse's matured foals begged to follow him. They too have sensed the aura of something important between the two. After a pause and consideration, the Hell Horse decided to mobilize in large number by leaving behind only the minimal number of them for the purpose of protecting this space and the children. It was the end of the dream-like moment in time that the Hell Horse had enjoyed. The earth tore itself, titanic fissures and rents appearing in a frenzy. The heavens reverberated as if titanic, invisible beings were warring on each other. The great waves came, vast mountains of water, sweeping clean all before them. The forbidden magics were unleashed, warping the very fabric of space itself. The monsters that surrounded the castle died instantly. The monsters screamed as they ran off, and even the demon kings fled. A man wearing an old cape appeared at the top of the castle wall. I am Merlin, your protector and guide. Everyone in the big city had their eyes fixed on the man. There were easily over 1 million eyes. Ah, it's Merlin. Merlin, the grand sorcerer. Everyone knelt down on their knees in awe. And Oscar, the man who was wearing the face of Merlin, nervously swallowed his saliva. Well, Bei Sungmin would take care of the rest himself, I'm sure. The scenario that Bei Sungmin had developed was playing out very well. Mulalin was in the middle of a celebration. There were all sorts of events going on in the streets. Magic devices and weapons with miraculous powers, which were the stuff of legends, were on full display for everyone to see. The white owls were flying in the air, and the priests drew on the powers of gods to make a spectacle, a celebration of fireworks. It was historic. No masters of Mulalin in any other times have ever celebrated in such a scale. Everyone's face lit up happily. They played, forgetting all of their worries. Wow, so delicious. How could an apple pack such sweetness? Bei Suzy had a happy smile after having bitten off a piece of a red apple. Quan Wang was next to her. Quan Wang sighed repetitiously. Should concentrate more on the training. This is celebration. If one does not enjoy it voluntarily, how can there be progress? Only if you couldn't speak. Ah, there's a Pierrot. Hi, please make me a balloon too. Phew. Bei Suzy ran after the Pierrot like a happy child. Of course, it was true that she was a child, but for Quan Wang, who wanted to teach her everything, it was somewhat deflating. Well, I guess she has already surpassed me. The speed with which Bei Suzy moved up in strength was beyond one's imagination. Quan Wang has never seen such a human. She has already surpassed the level of Quan Wang, who was one of the humanity's 10 strong ones. And the reason for that strength was due to the lineage of light, the special skill that Bei Suzy had. The lineage of light. By utilizing the skill that appropriately calibrated everything, Bei Suzy has become capable of all things. So it is good. Her spirit is high again. Bei Suzy had been feeling deflated after having met Mu Yang and Bei Sungmin. She was also angry because Quan Wang took her away without consent. As a result, she has been focused only on training as if she had no other choice. So it was good to see her feel happy again for the first time in a long while. It would start slowly. After some time has passed, Quan Wang went out to the square. There were already a countless number of people in the square. Everyone wanted to hear the Pope speak. To be exact, it would be the words of the God's vessel, which the Pope would be relaying. Mulalin was taken over by the God's vessel. She was the most likely one to have commissioned this celebration as well. They must be after something. Quan Wang has years of experience. He did not think that such a celebration could have been planned overnight. There must be something behind this celebration. Ta-ta-ta-ta. The trumpets blew. The Pope. Long live the Pope. Everyone raised their hands. The Pope has come. And as always, there was Hyacinth, the God's vessel. Hyacinth, the vessel of God. Although she hasn't outgrown a girl's figure, a blinding charm was being permeating from her. There was nothing more to say about it, as she even made a puppet out of the Pope. My heart is pounding even by looking at her from this distance. Phew. Quan Wang reluctantly turned his head. It was so that he could only focus on the Pope. Wow, that woman is really pretty. Just like a doll. But she looks very familiar. Holding a lollipop that was as big as her head, Bei Suzy came running. Bei Suzy did not even shake at the power of the charm. Anything that has been categorized as evil power could not breach Bei Suzy's boundaries easily, and it was the same in this case, it seemed. Dear people of the Holy City, I hope you will enjoy today's celebration. The Pope began to speak. Then the anticipated speech has begun. Prayer. Bei Suzy unconsciously let out a long yawn. But she soon closed his mouth after drawing the attentions of others around her. Teacher, has the Pope been always very talkative like that? Then she discreetly whispered to Quan Wang. Quan Wang shook his head. The Pope was famous for not saying much. He only spoke of words that were needed to be said. However, the Pope spoke too much today. Not long ago, 2 demon kings had invaded the great city. And Merlin had stopped them. Merlin. This story has already been spread throughout the Holy Empire. The grand sorcerer Merlin. People called him the protector of the Green Temple. The protector has personally come out into the world. Referencing him, the Pope wanted to set a course for the future. Although his words were long, there was only one conclusion. Our new holy city will follow the will of Merlin and lead in overthrowing the demon gods. For every citizen and humanity. Wah wah. It's a war. Quan Wang creased his forehead. Why a war all of a sudden? However, people did not have a shroud of doubt. They appeared to simply follow as what was being suggested. At this level, it appeared that everyone was under the influence of a group spell. Let's go. We should leave Mulalin. It was not a good omen. Quan Wang said, but no reply came back. Thinking it as being odd, he looked around him, but Bei Suzy was nowhere to be found. Where has this rascal gone now? Someone was looking at me. Bei Suzy suddenly had that thought. Although she looked around, she could not find anyone who was secretly watching her. What's going on? Bei Suzy's sensory perception was on a different level than others since she was little. Even recognized by Mu Young, those advanced senses had saved Bei Suzy's life several times. Especially after she had obtained the lineage of light from the Sky Library, that power has increased. When she had briefly borrowed Mu Young's power in the past, she had felt as if she had become a god. That sensation still remained inside Bei Suzy. And the power which has reached its maximum level was telling her that she must trust her senses. Who is it? He was curious. She was curious as to who would be watching her in secrecy in a frenzied situation like this. Above all, she felt no presence of hostility from her senses. Rather, she felt a sense of affection. Let's find this person. Feeling that she couldn't lose the person like this, Bei Suzy quickly utilized a flying skill. She was confident when it came to speed. It was not an exaggeration to say that no one has ever escaped from Bei Suzy's pursuit. Her maximum speed was near supersonic level. However, the one she chased with her senses hit himself even faster. She went to the top of the cathedral but found no one. There is a trace of teleportation magic. However, using magic alone couldn't escape her. This opponent was underestimating Bei Suzy. After having had assimilated with Mu Young, Bei Suzy's sensory perceptions have already reached beyond anyone's imagination. It was like when the king of fighting Wang had mastered everything about the Mystery Moon sect. The word genius wasn't even good enough to describe Bei Suzy. As a result, she was able to use the sight that could see the traces of magic and the movements of the magic power. Whoever you are, won't it be fun playing hide and seek with me? Bei Suzy too became unyielding. To turn back at this point wasn't like Bei Suzy at all. Bei Suzy's creed was finish what was started. Behind such a character stood Mu Young, but to her credit, Bei Suzy was able to come this far without giving up. Bei Suzy chased after the scent of mana. And when she was about to reach the source of the scent, the target disappeared again. Bei Suzy was impressed as the situation repeated several times. A powerful sorcerer. His spell casting time is close to 0. It was a well-known fact that it takes a while to initiate teleportation magic for an ordinary sorcerer. Or that there was a limitation as to how many times it could be initiated. These limitations did not seem to apply to the sorcerer that she was after. They said the great sorcerer Merlin has come to the great city. Has he come here? Although she might have been tired, Bei Suzy did not quit. Getting interesting. It was becoming interesting for her. It was as if she had traveled back in time to her childhood. There was some sense of having fun, just like when she had run around with her childhood friends. The opponent also seemed to be keeping pace with Bei Suzy as well. The hide and seek continued until the sun was setting. Perhaps, impressed by the tenacity, at some point in time the pattern of magic has changed. Bei Suzy tilted her head. Now that running away isn't working, he has decided to entice me? The width and length of the entire territory of Mulalin might have been covered in this game of hide and seek. Then all of a sudden he was moving underground. Knowing fully that Bei Suzy was after him, it dared Bei Suzy to approach. Although it was a provocation, Bei Suzy felt like she was being enticed. Perhaps it was because she had eaten sweets earlier, that she decided to be entertained. The underground sewers. Bei Suzy ran on top of the flowing water. She had long ago mastered the level of flying skill which allowed her to not fall into the water. Even though she was able to run in the air, she didn't need to be flying around in such a limited space. How long has it been since she has been moving in that fashion? Someone is here. She felt a presence. The cross-junction of the underground sewers. There was someone on the other side of the wall. It was the moment that she could finally see the end of, after almost half a day of the game of hide and seek. Bei Suzy approached cautiously. As the unknown opponent was an incredible sorcerer, she could not let her guard down. Having come into a certain range, she quickly stopped. A man wearing a black robe over his body was standing at the cross junction. And as soon as she saw the person, Bei Suzy shook all over. The eyes that appeared to be like the Apollyon. She couldn't have forgotten it. You are. Leave Mulalin. A low voice rumbled inside of Bei Suzy's ears. She was certain that it was the lich that was with Mu Young. Why are you here? You need not know. Didn't need to know? And immediately telling her to leave didn't seem fair. Above all, why hadn't he just left Bei Suzy high and dry? With the skills that this lich had, he could have escaped from my chase 100 times over. No matter how advanced Bei Suzy's flying skill was, it was no match for the lich who had once battled against the Demon King in Roth. Come to think of it, a strange memory lingered on. That day. The day when she had assimilated with Mu Young and faced in Roth. Bei Suzy was captured and finally lost her consciousness. However, under a very blurry vision, she remembered seeing the lich who was before her. Whether it was real or not wasn't certain though. But his affectionate eyes, for some reason, remained in her memory. And it was the same this time around. Indeed, it was the lich who was watching her with affection, and who played hide and seek as if he wanted to play with her. Then why? No. Bei Suzy shook her head. I wasn't sure before, but now I am. Why did you save me? I had no value after being captured by Roth. That was no value in saving me by risking yourself. Was I not a bother? In fact, the lich had treated Bei Suzy as a burden. Yet he saved Bei Suzy at the end. Choosing to self-destruct, he separated Roth from Bei Suzy. His gaze on Bei Suzy for some reason seemed urgent, sentimental and longing. Bei Suzy hasn't even once forgotten that gaze even now. Who are you? I'm a ghost. My master's shadow. You do not need to be involved in the matter at hand. My master would not want that either. Mu Young, he has never once told me to stop. Not even once. Mu Young was an excuse. When danger struck, facing it head-on was who Mu Young was. Mu Young was telling Bei Suzy to run? Mu Young wasn't someone who would talk that way without any reasonable explanation. In one word, it was an excuse. The lich was making an excuse. It's been always that way since the beginning. Although I have never seen you and that even you were a lich, my heart pounded. It wasn't affection, but certainly it was something close or maybe even a higher emotion than that, and it surprised me. It was always that way no matter how you treated me or distanced yourself from me. Who are you? Bei Suzy had a very complicated expression on her face. It was the one question that she could never shake off. It would be easier if it was affection. Just affection, that was. However, I wasn't. This pounding of her heart, it was a sense of longing and poignancy. But Bei Sungmin was silent. Wouldn't even he want to reveal himself? Would he not want to say that you are my daughter? However, look at his appearance. There was no warmth in his body, he was dead. The ever so shabby-looking self without even a single piece of flesh on him. Leave. You cannot stay in this war. Bei Sungmin grabbed his staff. Pwing. Sharp wind has blown towards Bei Suzy like sharp saw teeth. She tried to dodge it, but her shoulder has been penetrated through at once. Plop. Wait. Bei Suzy could not continue her words. She fell, losing her consciousness. Bei Sungmin looked upon the fallen Bei Suzy. To prevent small bugs or other things from even approaching close, he has established a barrier, and even placed several magic spells, so that Bei Suzy's body temperature would remain steady. A month from now, Bei Suzy would be able to crack this barrier and come out of it herself. You have to live. As he had incorporated very strong sleep spell, she won't be able to wake up for at least a month from now. Bei Sungmin gazed on Bei Suzy for a while, then turned away. Much needed to be done. It was exactly 3 days since Bei Sungmin had left. Splash. Splash. Someone approached with the sound of splashing water. What the heck, wasn't it here? No one is here. A small fairy riding a black horse said in an angry tone. Black horse, this is the right place? But it isn't here. Did you just lie to us? No. It's here? Well, as far as we can tell, there is one girl here, I see. And strangely, my dear husband's scent is here too. Sniff. Wuhi the fairy approached the established barrier sniffing like a dog. Although shielded within the barrier, she was clearly visible to the eyes of the hell horse and Wuhi. Then looking at Bei Suzy who was inside the barrier, they tilted their heads. I smell the scent of my dear husband from this girl. Could it be an affair? Wu-hee, pouting her lips, closely examined Bei Suzy. Mu-young's scent was rather strong. It was so because Bei Suzy and Mu-young had once assimilated, but Wu-hee could not know that. The reason even for the hell horse to have made a mistake was exactly because of that reason too. And Wu-hee has never met Bei Suzy before. Bah, my dear husband must have taken in a new woman when Wu-hee wasn't around. Hing. The hell horse laughed at her. Many women will follow strong man. Even the hell horse, being called the king of the unicorns, spent time with hundreds of maras. However, no one ever complained. That was because the hell horse was the king there. What? Geez, all men are the same. Wu-hee crossed her arms while spitting out many of the familiar curses. Hey Black Horse, let's take this girl too. I'm going to question him, will it be her or Wu-hee? Hing. The hell horse tilted his head once again. It would be simple to just kill her and leave the body there if she didn't like the girl. However, Wu-hee didn't want to leave the girl who might somehow have some sort of relationship with Mu-young. The hell horse thought that Wu-hee lived a complicated life. There was an emergency. Demon tribes have surrounded Gremory's temple where the opposition forces have gathered. They numbered close to 10 million, but the tension level has reached the maximum point. Why is he here? Is he going to break the non-aggression pact? That was such an opponent that showed up here. The ground that he walked on was rotted and turned black. His breath was a fetid green, virulent with pestilence. It was like he was indeed the personification of death, the grim reaper, harvester of souls. And countless number of monsters and undead lurked behind him. The king of the dead. Why did the one of the 4 transcendental lords that ruled the north come here? Even though there were 5 demon gods, the king of the dead was no pushover. However, why was he here? There was a plan of congregating the transcendental beings, but that was supposed to happen in the future. Bei Sungmin and Han Sung, the Lord of Dragons, were supposed to make it happen. However, he came without anyone calling for him, while leading the countless undead. O King of the Dead, go back, or you will regret it. Muramuru, who was the most belligerent one, stepped forward. However, the King of the Dead did not even glance at Muramuru. His sight was only fixed at one person, Mu-young. Mu-young creased his forehead. Although he wasn't sure that the bastard's intent was him, he couldn't figure out why he had shown up without even getting called upon. However, the bastard was certainly calling for Mu-young. Therefore, Mu-young stepped forward as the King of the Dead wanted him to do. You've some business with me. My God has led me to you. An immediate response. However, it was a surprise that the King of the Dead was a devout believer. Even a being like you follow a god? I follow the same god you follow. Mu-young follows a god? It was the first time such thing was being said. Mu-young does not have a blind faith in a god. In fact, he could be called the ultimate atheist. Believed in God? As Mu-young was feeling strange, the King of the Dead continued. Artanius. The true mighty one of death who has blessed you. Death Lord. His true name was uttered from the lips of the dead. It was a completely unexpected situation. The transcendental being, the King of the Dead who rules the north, and the Death Lord were involved. He and the King of the Dead were similar as their power was based on death. Mu-young too has completely harnessed the Death Lord's power as his own. For this reason, Mu-young felt some level of familiarity with the king, even though the transcendental beings were both wary and antagonistic. So it didn't appear to have been just a simple mistake. However, Death Lord was in the darkness. How did Death Lord, who was a being in the darkness, come in contact with the King of the Dead? Why were you sent here by Artanis? Mu-young could not resist asking. If he has come to help, then that would be the best response. It was because one of the most difficult transcendental beings was the King of the Dead. We are to battle using only the art of death. My God has said that he would cast out the loser. However, what the King of the Dead has said was unexpected. The end of the art of death meant combat. Then the King of the Dead was someone who also used the art of death. It was hard to believe that there was another one besides Mu-young who had the same power. Renounced by the Death Lord. Mu-young fell into a deep thought. As a matter of fact, the King of the Dead was famous for isolation. Even when the demon gods were going berserk or when other transcendental beings would come forth, the King of the Dead did not make any moves from the high, cold mountains of the north. Because of that, the North Mountains were a territory that could not be attacked. However, it was someone who was solitary who had shown up where Mu-young was. That was how badly the Death Lord's power was coveted. I accept. There was no reason to not accept it. Of course, There was a high possibility that the loser of this battle would become whatever the winner wished. Perhaps, it was possible that the loser would be brought back as an undead. However, Muyang was confident. At least Muyang was confident when it came to art. Of course, Muyang wouldn't be the only one who was confident. The king of the dead too, of course. Every one of the dead that he has brought with him was unusual. Maybe it was him who was keeping the tradition of Death Lord rather than Muyang. That was the ability to maximize the strength using the ingredients. However, Muyang valued the narratives. No one knew for sure who would come out as the victor when their skills were completely different. The rules of the battle are simple. Using the same material, it would be who is able to create greater art. It was art only in words, as it really meant the battle of who was able to create the more powerful death. It was important to determine the standards in judging that creation, but it was worth a fight should the rules be applied fairly. I also have a condition. Muyang spoke, breaking a short silence. Accepting the challenge was the natural thing to do, but accepting it on its face value alone was foolish. Even more so in a situation like this. Speak. The king of the dead was carefree. It was as if he felt that his victory was obvious. Certainly, if he had been anointed with the art of death from Death Lord, he would have been using that power much longer than Muyang has. On the other hand, the time that Muyang has spent on mastering the art of death was much shorter. He would hear Muyang out. Muyang spoke as he looked around the area. I want to change the venue. Our art is not something to be seen by others. The demon gods and demon tribes. Everyone was looking at the two of them. However, the power associated with the art of death was one of Muyang's secret weapons. As the powers of Lucifer and the archangel Gabriel were revealed, at least he wanted to keep this one a secret. The demon gods did not know what this battle called art was about. Besides, both the king of the dead and Muyang had already passed the point where it required a third party's evaluation. There probably wasn't anyone there who understood that either. That was, other than the king of the dead and Muyang. That's appropriate. The king of the dead has accepted the request. He then swung his sickle. As the sickle was swung, a black hole appeared next to him. Enter. No one will interrupt us in here. The king of the dead entered through the hole alone. It was an unspoken pressure put on Muyang for him to also follow alone. Muyang, I'll go with you. Taken tried to dissuade him. The motive of appearing suddenly and leading him away seemed suspicious. However, Muyang just shook his head. No, I must go alone. The pride of being a death artist and the future were riding on this battle. Muyang had intended to take everything from Death Lord and also gain the king of the dead. Cheating did not occur to him. The only solution was to face it head-on. He came of his own volition. I should face it personally by myself. He walked towards the black hole. Then the underlings of the king of the dead surrounded Muyang. They were determined to not let anyone else enter through the hole. Even the demon gods could not move hastily. It seemed as if the king of the dead has brought all of his troops with him. By looking purely at the numbers, they were as many as there were demons. Of course, if they were to engage in direct confrontation, the demon gods would be superior, but they would still suffer significant damages. It was because every one of the undead were the personal creations of the king of the dead. I'll be right back. As soon as Muyang entered the hole, the black hole disappeared without a trace. It was a feeding ground. The dungeon was filled with crying monsters in cages. I've captured them for this battle. From the lowest of the goblins to the highest of the dragons. If any of the ingredients are needed, you may use them at will. The king of the dead said as if he was being generous. The dungeon was much more spacious than anyone could have imagined, and there were monsters that Muyang has never seen before. It looked as if all the monsters of the demon world were kept there. Impressive. Not only by the sheer numbers, but he was awed by the fact that this many types were collected. Muyang walked around the feeding ground. The ranks of the monsters rose higher as Muyang walked towards the end, and dragons were positioned at the end. Fire dragon, water dragon, earth dragon, light dragon. Even those legendary ones like Phoenix and Griffin. What should I make? That will be assigned by Artanis. The Death Lord will tell us that himself? It was then. Complete a chimera by using every ingredient. Time limit 72 hours. The words that appeared before his eyes. They were different than the usual writings. It was an incredibly bad writing, as if the Death Lord had scrawled it himself. Although he did not appear in person, it was obvious that this too was considered a test. Chimera. The king of the dead began to move as if he had anticipated it to a certain level. He then moved to collect the needed ingredients from the cages. This battle, I'm at a disadvantage. The feeding ground was spacious. It was as big as a good-sized city. To prepare this type of facility in the dungeon was incredible, but what was more important was that the king of the dead knew precisely where everything was located. Truly, this was a disadvantageous fight. Could never be fair. Yet it wasn't possible to halt a fight that has already started. And all this while the clock was ticking. The phoenix was chosen first by him. Phoenix and the fire dragon. It was obvious from the get-go that he wanted to make the top-level chimera by using the best ingredients. Was he going to make a fire god? Chimera, the collective being of countless number of monsters. It was a difficult task. Unlike the simple undead, making a chimera was a complex process as it was done by putting together the strengths of many monsters. However, there was a possibility of side effects if, for instance, inharmonious bodies were forcibly fused together. The combination also needed to be considered carefully. Certainly, good ingredients were helpful in creating a good chimera. Even though this was an unshakable truth, it was somewhat different than what Muyang wanted. Muyang walked over to the cage of an orc lord with red feather. The orc lord seemed to have some sort of a story. What is your name? Muyang tried to engage in a conversation. The king of the dead could not understand what Muyang was up to. For over 24 hours Muyang has been talking with the monsters. There were nearly 10,000 monsters in the feeding ground. Was he going to talk to every one of them? Cannot understand. It was getting harder and harder to understand as time went by. At any rate, the art of death was the power of control. The undead becomes absolutely obedient when it was created by the power of control. The prior memory and spirit would both vanish into thin air. Even having them was useless. It was better to come up with a better combination by using better ingredients. There was not enough time even to think about it, yet all that Muyang did was converse like a madman. What was more surprising was the fact that the monsters were responding to Muyang's conversations. Being able to assimilate or perhaps share emotions. Muyang had such capabilities. However, they were skills which were useless in making a chimera. He probably knew it from the beginning. That this battle was absolutely unfair against him. However, there was no intention of going easy. Equality did not exist in the true sense in this world. Going around screaming for equality only made one become an easy prey. The king of the dead stopped thinking. Instead, he kept his focus on his own creation. The embodiment of fire. I'll make the monster of monsters that burn up everything. The phoenix that was born of the hottest fire. The fire dragon that had the authority over fire, fire tar, the fire giant, and the fire spirit of the highest level were combined. Was that all? Then the essences were extracted from all the collected monsters having the characteristics of fire. Then a heart would be made by compressing hundreds of those extracted essences. Then place the hide of gigantes, which was supposed to have the toughest skin as the outer layer, and overlaid it with magic that induced fire energy, allowing it to blaze even more with fire mana. Then imbue it with all the skill learned from making undead. He dared to believe that he would definitely create the most powerful creation of all time. The king of the dead did not try to hide that process. It was possible because he was certain of his victory even if Muyang was to make a chimera with the characteristics of water. If not, he intended to put him in despair before then. However, Muyang did not give up nor was in despair. He did not even give looks over at the monsters having water elements. Muyang continued his conversations even after the 60th hour of the 72 hours. At this rate, it could have been easily concluded that he did not have the will to make a chimera. Rather than being an artist of death, he might as well be close friend to the monsters, perhaps. It's practically done. However, exactly right after the 62nd hour, Muyang's activities have changed. With 10 more hours to go, Muyang has stopped conversing with the monsters. The 10,000 or so monsters had 10,000 stories. But it was impossible to collect all those stories. Instead, it was possible to choose a theme and resolve them in Muyang's own way. The subject this time around is Han. Han. We call sorrow, resentment, regret, and sadness as Han. Muyang gathered those filled with Han. He didn't take the monsters' ranks into consideration at all. How big was the Han, how desperate and regrettable they were. Muyang had assimilated with them. So he was able to tell how big their Hans were. The demon dragon was the one that had the biggest horn of them all. Furthermore, it was a very scrubby-looking demon dragon at that. It was a severely impoverished-looking dragon that if it was to die, no one would think anything of it. Born of the darkness, the dragon was cursing the world itself. I was abandoned from the moment of my birth. I was betrayed, used, and lost everything. My skin was torn, teeth were broken, and my entire body was repeatedly destroyed and regenerated. I dare to curse the world even after I die. I will even curse the god that gave me birth. The demon dragon was able to barely retaining his life by only eating despair and curses. Even the other dragons refused to give a kind look at the miserable dragon. As a matter of fact, they evaded it as if it was filthy. Muyang has chosen him. Muyang undoubtedly believed that it would be the core of his work. You will be reborn as new. You will spew out your loathing towards the world. No one will be able to ignore you, and no one will be able to stop your loathing. Cursed and curse again. Despair and despair again. That Han will become a strong driving force that will lead to the birth of a strong emotion. Muyang gathered all their Han. Even for Muyang, who was the creator, the gathered Han became so overwhelming that it led to harnessing an incredible force. If Muyang hasn't been able to overcome his limitations many times, he would have been drowned in that Han. Muyang did not even assign any particular form to them. Only that by fusing and fusing again, he has created them into a great spirit of evil. And finally, that great spirit of evil began to take a shape on its own. Muyang granted his magic power to that and overlaid it with Lucifer's power. The spirit of evil grew in size on its own. The Yin energy has reached the most extreme level. Burning red, that form grew horn and spread its wings. Finally, an incredible amount of Yin energy has been collected. The 3 pieces of cracked fragments are beginning to pull together the Yin energy. The great spirit of evil has successfully completed the process of self-formation. Please be careful. The power of evil is not something that can be handled easily. If the user's capability is not sufficient, you may suffer a spiritual contamination. The malice of evil. The final form, Crimson Balok, has been created. Pooing. The 2 pairs of red wings stretched out immensely. The horrendous-looking teeth and rough red pupils. The great monster, which was wearing a skeleton armor and shimmering with the power of curse, has been completed before Muyang's eyes. Crimson Balrog. Muyang has already had a run-in with an ordinary Balrog. Rose. The monster that was let loose in order to threaten his territory. It was Bei Suzi, the one connected to Muyang, who defeated the monster, but the power of a Balrog was beyond imagination. Even Bei Sungmin had a tough time, and it was only after the support from Bei Suzi, who was connected to Muyang, that the monster had been taken care of. The Balrog was a monster that even many of the demon kings would dare to face. But then that Crimson Balrog? A form that was shaped by integrating every kind of hatred, and resentment was as scarlet as blood. Even at a quick glance, it did not come across as an ordinary Balrog. Krara. The ground shook. It was because Crimson Balrog let out a horrible shriek. Pok-pok. Hih. Prung. Krunrung. Every monster went mad. They cringed in fear of Crimson Balrog. What was more surprising was the fact that even members of a dragon race, of the highest rank, were included among them. Dragon. An archaic race with strong pride. They screamed loudly. Even at the mere appearance of Crimson Balrog, they were trembling with fear. Then the Crimson Balrog looked at Muyang. The resentment and hatred towards the world was being directed at Muyang as well. I am your master. Puck. It was in a blink of an eye. One of Muyang's arms was sliced off. The Crimson Balrog attacked Muyang. Krara. He roared as he pounded on his own chest. He did not recognize his master. It appeared as if he would strike out at anyone in his hatred. Muyang put a smile on his face. Divine blessing. The detached arm has instantly been restored. There wasn't much damage. Muyang allowed the attack on purpose. Muyang knew very well of the demon dragon's hatred, the resentment of a bastard. Is that all you've got? Did you not say that you would curse the world? Go ahead. Vent out all your resentments. Crimson Balrog looked into Muyang's eyes. Muyang did not avoid those eyes. He only prepared to absorb the attacks that Crimson Balrog was about to launch at him. At the same time, he has even chastised the Balrog. Do your best. Clearly choose the target of your resentment. Krara. It was like screaming. A howling. However, it was like a movements of a baby in the end. It was because his rage had started from the fact that no one has ever paid attention to him. The scariest thing in the world was apathy. Kung. Muyang's body levitated in the air. Pong. Crimson Balrog struck down Muyang. Immediately, penetrating through the surface, Muyang's body was buried deep into the ground. Red particles gushed out of Crimson Balrog's mouth. With that single attack, Muyang was buried deep underground several thousand feet. However, Muyang wasn't dead. Pig. Muyang re-emerged out of the gigantic hole. His entire body was a wreck, but his body was whole. When it came to recovering physical body, the divine blessing skill level came close to being perfect. Unless an impact which was beyond the healing range of the skill was delivered, Muyang would continue to regenerate. You're long ways away. Your resentment cannot reach me. Be more angry. Curse more. Powing. Showing. After spewing out his own blood, Crimson Balrog made a sword out of it. Then he sliced Muyang's body into two halves. Impressive. The fact that this much impact could be delivered to Muyang, who has attained half divinity with invincible skin, only emphasized Crimson Balrog's power. And the skill which turned his own blood into a sword. Had he attacked Muyang without any hesitation, it would have even put Muyang in danger. However, he was indecisive. It was because, like Muyang, there has never been anyone who would openly accept his resentments. The reason for his rage and resentment was due to extreme apathy and utter contempt. No one has ever shown interest, and even if there was someone who had shown interest, that person would avoid him as if one was encountering something contemptible. Anyone who had approached him has shown smile if he was useful, but once that usefulness dissipated, they had tossed him to the side without any hesitation. However, Muyang was different. Muyang's interest was only focused on Crimson Balrog. Without good or evil, he was just accepting of Crimson Balrog's bratty behavior. Bratty behavior. That was right. It was just bratty behavior. Look at me. Please pay attention to me. That was what this bratty behavior was all about. And Muyang was paying him exactly the right attention that he has been asking for. His body was torn and regenerated for a countless number of times. Even for Muyang, exhausting his power at this level could be risky. However, Muyang did not give up. He tried all he could to hear his story until the end. I even knew a person like that. This name was not his in the first place. It was because Muyang had the name of Yiyang in the past. If he hadn't met the true Muyang, his original personality Yiyang while he was training to be an executioner, he would have lost his sense of self early on, and could not even have come back to the past. Muyang, at this moment, knew as well as anyone as to how comforting it was to the Crimson Balrog in just listening to his story. After how many times has it repeated? The Crimson Balrog plopped down and sat on the ground. And he sobbed. Sadness. Just sadness. As if he had become a child, he sobbed. Muyang approached him. Although he felt like his body was being torn apart, all of his magical powers were exhausted and he had been pushed to his limits, he just wanted to tell him a few simple words. You are no longer alone. And right at that moment, Crimson Balrog has been influenced by the user, Muyang. Soul Companion effect is maximized. B+ is pluff. Crimson Balrog's capabilities are increasing immensely. Crimson Balrog is being endowed with a new capability, imprinting. The imprinting has the same effect of a chick, considering the first being it sees as its parent. Crimson Balrog's capabilities will increase immensely if a subject who has succeeded in imprinting is close by. Crimson Balrog's comprehensive statistics are being displayed. Comprehensive level. 785 power 910 700 plus 210, agility 845, 650 plus 195, stamina 910 700 plus 210, intelligence 715 550 plus 165, wisdom 715 550 plus 165, resistance to magic 780, 600 plus 180, magical power 780 600 plus 180, plus soul companion. All capabilities plus 15%, plus initial recognition, all capabilities plus 15%, plus cursed cries, S, blood sword, S++, blood wave, S+, demolisher, S+, berserker, S+++, activates only in special circumstances, skills available for use plus. All attributes resistance plus 80%. They were awesome statistics. Even if there weren't any additional stats, the status window showed the powers that come close to Bei Sungmin's. Who would have thought that the base stats would be strengthened by a percentage? The skills or even the base stats, there were nothing to throw away. At this level, even Enrose would not be a match. He dared to say that this was the most powerful monster ever. Muyang smiled with satisfaction. I'll leave it to you now. This type of exhaustion was felt for the first time in a long while. The feeling that his own body was not like his own. Was it because he has been torn apart and regenerated a countless number of times? Crimson Balrogshik. Perhaps he was more surprised to have such feelings for the first time. His consciousness became blurred. Muyang spoke the final words as he closed his eyes. The words that would turn everything upside down. I trust you. Plop. The King of the Dead sneered and laughed internally. You have created something quite great, but it was unexpected. He did not anticipate that something like that would be created. He has created the form of Crimson Balrog by integrating every form of resentment. It was a unique monster that might appear and might not appear at the same time like Chimera. However, the problem was from that point on. Krara. Crimson Balrog did not listen. The cries of curse. It was an embarrassment to have created such a monster that listened to no one for someone who was competing in the art of death. The creation that he had himself made did not listen to him. But then the bastard went a step further. It's gone mad. By foregoing defense, he was taking all the attacks without any resistance. No matter how great the level was, even for Muyang, taking such hits would be risky. It was like an act of suicide. I'm the victor of this battle. The King of the Dead turned his head. Although it wasn't sitting well with him for winning for doing almost nothing, it wasn't something that he would reject. As the bastard has voluntarily walked towards death, the King of the Dead just needed to seize the victory at leisure. And not too long after, he has completed his creation. The fire beast, the shape of fire itself. Would the god of fire be like this? The assembled fire was flaring up like active volcano. The essence and spirit of fire, it was a harmonious creation from combining the fire monsters. However, it wasn't just a fire. Even hellfire wouldn't come close. The fire that destroys everything. The King of the Dead was satisfied. The level of its completion was in the top 3 among his creations of all time. However, as far as purity was concerned, nothing came close. The fire in its extremity ignores all attributes. Did they say that Horus, the fire demon god, was destroyed with fire by Diablo? He had an idea from that story. Even though he was a ruler of the northern region, he was well aware of everything that was going on in the demon world. And what certainly has attracted him was the appearance of Diablo. Was it possible to destroy the fire demon god with fire? However, he thought that it was possible as he gazed upon what has just been created. This fire that has been strengthened to the ultimate, and thus became pure, would crush every lesser fire. No foe was to be feared at this level of completion. No matter how awesome a monster this bastard created, it would be rendered useless before this fire beast. The King of the Dead was confident. There could be no defeat. For someone like himself who has trained for several hundred years in the art of death, it was impossible for him to lose to someone who had an embarrassingly low level of training in the same skill. I believe. The King of the Dead looked at his foe. It's done. At that moment, Muyang fell to the ground. It was truly a foolish move. That lump of curse would not listen to him no matter what. The monster that has piled up curses and resentments. Even the King of the Dead had made such things many times. And the result was always the same. By cursing itself and cursing the world, it would lead to self-destruction in the end. That is, after destroying everything in its vicinity. Can never be controlled. The King of the Dead was certain. He will die. If he has fallen, that will be the end. He could not even regenerate as he has fully exhausted himself. Even if that monster in the form of Balrog was to step on Muyang, he would die slowly without being able to do anything. However, that was supposed to be, but... Kwong. Crimson Balrog turned his body. Kwong. Kwong. And then it walked towards the fire beast, which the King of the Dead has created. What? It was unbelievable. Has he put the monster that was formed only with resentment under his control? Even the mad, reckless behavior needed to be rethought. Certainly. The King of the Dead has readjusted his assessment of Muyang at a higher level. However, it was no use. It has been about 10 hours since that Balrog has been created. The level of completion would certainly not be high. "O fire beast, burn him. Do not leave even ashes." Boom. The fire beast flared up even bigger, the fires which shrouded his body. Poing. And the crimson Balrog rushed in to launch an attack. Poing. The fire beast withstood the crimson Balrog's attack. However, a big hole was made on the ground. Crimson Balrog did not fear the flames that the fire beast had at all. Instead, he grabbed the neck of the fire beast with both hands and bit it. Poong. Poong. Flaring up even more, the fire beast's flames engulfed the crimson Balrog's body. However, there was not the slightest movement on the part of crimson Balrog. Instead, the fire beast's arm was bitten off. As the attack became more extreme with more power, the body of the crimson Balrog began to explode, unable to withstand the horrifying heat. Purr. The great shrieking sound. The fire thrashed with the shrieking of crimson Balrog. The fire that was engulfing crimson Balrog was instantly blown away by the sheer fury of that scream. Quong, 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 quong. After putting the fire beast to the ground, crimson Balrog began to throw punches with both hands as if he has gone mad. With every punch thrown, the ground shook and the facilities that had been strengthened with magic have become demolished. The king of the dead stood agape, unable to comprehend. What crimson Balrog showed Muyang was infinitely charming. It would be believable even to say that the crimson Balrog had the appearance of a very strong demon god, based on the power that has been demonstrated just now. How? Blood came flowing out of the hands of the crimson Balrog. The blood formed the shape of a sword, and holding one sword in each hand, crimson Balrog slashed the fire beast as if he had gone mad. It was gruesome. The king of the dead has never seen such a gruesome scene. Even though it was a monster of integrated curse, its purpose was to follow Muyang's instructions to the end. Crimson Balrog stopped only after the fire beast's body has been squashed, torn to pieces, and its head was cut off. Kraria. And it let out a victorious scream. It happened in a blink of an eye. The king of the dead uttered in a delirious manner. How can this be? Death Lord had been watching what has been unfolding from the beginning. Having left the darkness, he was at one time active in the demon world and more recently had taught the one called the King of the Dead. Afterwards, the King of the Dead had been able to establish the foundation of a transcendental being, but he could not influence the Death Lord's mind. Kingslayer, is this what you saw? Muyang's way was very crude. It was different, dangerous, and unconventional. What of that? The Death Lord saw the possibilities from that. Seeing and feeling things that which have not been seen or felt before, he could somehow understood them when he saw Muyang. It was possible that Kingslayer realized this side of Muyang. Therefore, Kingslayer had bet all of his hopes on Muyang. That was on Muyang, who had endless possibilities. This is not an undead. What was more surprising was the very essence of the Crimson Balrog. Even though he was born filled with resentment and curses, there was overwhelming life force unlike the undead. How could there be such life force from the entity that had such extreme een from the beginning? It was as if he had been revived from the dead. Death Lord of the past had wanted to create true life. He despaired because he couldn't do it, and he had lost the possibility when he became a lich himself. However, Muyang's way has given him a new beginning. It was as if was teaching Death Lord that there existed a way such as this. Create life with death. No, transcend a story into life. Death Lord trembled. It was on a different level than any other undead that Muyang has made so far. It was a true work of the art, created by Muyang, who has attained semi-divinity and numerous enlightenments. This was a beginning. It was simple, yet the method was never simple. Perhaps, however, it wasn't exquisite. That was strength, and yet it was also a weakness. If the experience of Death Lord was to be added, Muyang would attain the power of death and the true power of creation. Death Lord became certain. That was the certainty that by being able to leap beyond his own level, Muyang would be able to step into the territory that Death Lord wasn't able to reach. Oh Artanis, this duel is a mistake. The method of using that power is sinister and blasphemous, so I respectfully ask you to reconsider. The King of the Dead begged when the fire beast fell. He insisted that Muyang's art was wrong. I'm the traditional one who wields the power of death. I am the only one who can maximize this art. The King of the Dead knew well that Death Lord was looking into this space. Hui. The King of the Dead was much like Death Lord. That was, he could be called a traditionalist. Everything starting with that method was following the way of Death Lord. So his limitations were very clear. More than anything, the King of the Dead didn't like to go out beyond the boundaries. After establishing a place in the north, he was just happy to be living while ruling the territory. That was the reason as to why Death Lord has ignored the King of the Dead until now. On the other hand, how about Mu Young? Face head on and be victorious. That was the mentality that naturally attracted attention to Mu Young. Winner and loser have already been determined. If you are not going to surrender, your soul will be burned and I'll make a puppet out of you. The King of the Dead shuddered. His soul was in the hands of Death Lord. Although he had been endowed with many benefits, with a single word from Death Lord, his soul would be wandering about the netherworld. Follow him. Then you will learn the reason for your defeat. Do you think he can truly see the highest art? I'm not sure either. However, he is the only unique one who has a chance. Death Lord accepted. That was the fact that Kingslayer has placed a hope on Mu Young. He felt that too. That only Mu Young could take care of this irrationality, this confusion. At the same time, Death Lord probably understood his own limitations. In fact, it didn't matter to Death Lord as to whether this world was going to be destroyed or not. What Death Lord wanted to see was the art of the highest level. The realm that he wasn't able to reach. He just wanted to see Mu Young enter that realm. As promised, I'll hand over everything of mine to you. Death Lord struck the ground with the staff that he was carrying from the darkness. At the same time, as his essence was gathered, his soul crossed over from the darkness and entered into Mu Young. Hiss! Death Lord's body turned to powder and scattered away. His room that was in the darkness has also vanished. Mu Young opened his eyes. I feel rejuvenated. Although his body has been torn apart many times, he felt power as soon as opened his eyes. In fact, he felt even stronger than before. You are awake. It was inside Mu Young's place in the middle of Gremory's temple. The King of the Dead was there. Next to him was Crimson Balrog, who too was looking at Mu Young. They appeared quite happy, perhaps as it was the effect of imprinting. However, speaking with the King of the Dead was the very first thing to do. The fact that Crimson Balrog was intact meant that Mu Young was victorious from the duel. I've lost. The Crimson Balrog that you have created was beyond my imagination. However, it does not imply an acceptance of a complete defeat. Then what is the reason for you to be waiting for me to awake? Death Lord has said. By following you I would understand my own inadequacies. So, I'll be following you until I come to that understanding. The King of the Dead volunteered to come forward even though Mu Young did not say anything. An unexpected harvest. It meant the King of the Dead has surrendered. Mu Young checked it again. I'm thinking about a full-scale war with the demon gods. Will you still follow me? Demon gods do not scare me. The King of the Dead said nonchalantly, as if he really did not fear the demon gods. He was truly a strong ally. Mu Young spoke as he smiled. Welcome. One of the 4 transcendental beings. It was the moment the King of the Dead, the Master of the North, has joined Mu Young. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The King of the Dead. The word about him having left the Northern Territory and going to war spread quickly. Especially, the remaining transcendental beings were the first ones to learn of the news. Oh, King of the Dragons. The Dragon Lord Hansung. Hansung met the King of the Dragons in the Grand Garden in the Western Territory. Bei Sungmin was next to him. An incredibly huge being raised its head and looked at Bei Sungmin. You've brought an unpleasant one. You are probably aware of the news about the King of the North having entered the war. I'd like to inform you that this person's master is the one whom the King of the North follows. I'm Bei Sungmin. Bei Sungmin displayed an appropriate decorum. At any rate, that was how much power the transcendental beings wielded. Especially the King of the Dragons. He was the ruler who could mobilize all dragons. He was the most powerful entity among all the transcendental beings. However, the King of the Dragons did not intervene in this world. Yet after meeting Hansung, the Dragon Lord, Bei Sungmin wanted to meet the King of the Dragons. You must want me to enter the war with you against the demon gods. Even without saying anything, the King of the Dragons was already seeing right through him. He said it with certainty, deducing that there was no other reason for Bei Sungmin to pay him a visit. And Bei Sungmin too did not deny it. If you, the King of the Dragons, were to enter the war, it would clearly be very helpful in putting the radical demon gods in their places. However, I seek balance, so I have a fundamental policy of not getting involved in this world. The balance has been destroyed a long time ago already. They want the annihilation of all the races, including the dragons. In short, unless he was to enter the war, it meant every race, including the high and mighty dragon race, would be annihilated. Although it was nearing a threat, the king of the dragon did not budge. I do not fear them. Larigi the dragon hunter has fallen. My master has personally destroyed him. Larigi the demon god of war. He was also the demon god whose name was known as the dragon hunter. Muyang had condemned the one that was considered to be the arch-enemy of the dragons. Your master has annihilated Larigi? That's strange. Even the king of all the dragons could not see the truth in such news. The original rumor was that Solomon had destroyed him, but that is not the truth. It was a fake rumor that my master had spread on purpose. It was a maneuver to bring confusion to the radical demon gods. Is there a proof to your story? Bei Sungmin spun his staff once in the air. Then a magical field formed and a huge arm appeared in the empty space. The king of the dragons spoke after seeing the arm. That is Larigi's arm. This is the proof that my master has annihilated him. Just for a special occasion, this arm has been preserved. From the start of the hunt for Larigi, Muyang was thinking about the king of the dragons. Hence, one of the arms was kept preserved, and that was what Bei Sungmin has displayed here. Oh, the king of the dragons. The threat that was hunting the dragons is no more. However, the radical demon gods continue to make threats whenever possible. My master wishes the support of the king of the dragons. I too beg you. Han Sung, the dragon lord, also knelt down on his knees. Bei Sungmin who suddenly appeared. And after hearing Bei Sungmin, Han Sung wanted to join forces in aggressive manner. He has instinctively sensed the blowing wind. In that past, Han Sung also had the experience of standing at the forefront in the effort for humanity's victory. If given a minute possibility for victory, he was ready to bet everything on it. The king of the dragons was quiet. The death of Larigi was very pleasing to him. Furthermore, if it was Bei Sungmin's master who had killed Larigi, he was ready to endow him with many gifts. However, not being able to decide readily was because there was risk. He needed to take his time and carefully consider over and over again. Then Han Sung brought out several pieces of a sword from his coat. Oh, the king of the dragons, I was under orders to find the owner of this sword. Along with Sean Dalton, the dragon of light. Do you recall? I do. I had personally ordered you to locate the owner of that sword. And I found him. However, his trace no longer exists. Meaning, the noble knight of glory has been murdered. By a very strong being, a being that is able to twist time and space, that is. I was only just able to recover a few artifacts that belonged to him. He then brought out the cracked armor suit. The king of the dragons quietly gazed down on it. There was a slight shaking in the king's eyes as he looked at it. He is dead. The honorable knight of glory. I did not know of his existence, but I've learned a few things during my investigation. I've found relevant literature by searching out wise men and going through their libraries. That is, the fact that he and the king of the dragons had a relationship. Han Sung lowered his head even further. However, that knight is no longer living. I do not know what he had fought for, but I know of someone who is continuing on with his strength and mission. Speak. Who is it? Han Sung spoke, pointing to Bei Sungmin. His master, Muyang, is continuing the legacy of the power of the honorable knight of glory. Han Sung did not stop speaking. We have to mobilize. O king, we do not have much time. And it was also possible that the honorable knight of glory might have been fighting against strong enemies in order to protect this world. The one who is continuing his legacy is in the middle of the battlefield. The king of the dragons. His relationship with the honorable knight of glory was very deep. Although Han Sung did not mention it, the king of the dragons was one of the beasts that had been nurtured by the knight. Since his fate was to rule the dragons, he was watching the northern territory, yet the knight's death was also very sad to the king of the dragons. Finally, the king of the dragons came to a decision. Did you say Muyang? I shall meet him. The transcendental beings began to mobilize in earnest. Han Sung, the dragon lord, and Merlin. Their presence was highly symbolic. Han Sung, a transcendental being and a representative of the humanity, and Merlin, the sorcerer and protector of the humanity, were gathering the people. On top of that, with the formal proclamation of Mulilin's Great Alliance, it spread like wildfire, a feverish desire to overthrow the demon gods. And even Kim Taehwan, who has risen to the position of the Vice Guild Master of the Radiant Guild, was amongst the great host. This is truly a mighty force. Even many from Gunja province have joined. Xiao Yunxi, the head of the commanders, is the real power. They are saying that even the ruling family of Mulalin takes a step back from the commander's quiet orders. Wow, really pretty. No matter, still an old lady inside. Sure. You might be overheard. Everyone who was following Kim Taehwan was scolding the impertinent speaker at the same time. Walking at the front of them, Kim Taehwan surveyed the host for a while. I'll say roughly 3 million. 3 million. And that number was based only on those who were able to fight. This great number of people were marching over the hills. There has never been this many humans at one place in history. It was too simple. As if someone was manipulating it. However, the alliance formed very, very quickly this time around. As if everyone was under a spell, they all wanted to join the war with the demon gods. Was it Merlin's power? Or perhaps because the Dragon Lord Hansung and Mulalin have joined. But, leader, I've heard that it wasn't just us humans who were going to fight in this war. Breaking away from his thoughts, Kim Taehwan looked at the man who has approached him. He spoke quietly to the man with pronounced buck teeth. The Grand Sorcerer has said that this war wasn't just our war. So, does that mean that everyone is gathering at a specific location within the demon god's territory? Could this be a trap? I also have a hard time believing that there will be good cooperation among the races that will meet each other for the first time. It was a reasonable doubt. The progress was going smoothly, but the problem was what happens later. Merlin, who has started the war with the demon gods, vowed to help wiping them out. I can't believe that the objective of the demon gods is to end every other life form. On top of that, Merlin also spoke several truths about this world. The proof of the demon gods' mobilization, and their unpreparedness to resist was one of them as he pushed for quick response from humanity. It wasn't possible for the humanity to not mobilize. They have already been threatened several times by the Sky Demon. Rather than self-interest, a great cause and survival have become the highest priorities. As a result, cooperation came quickly. Furthermore, if the demon gods were truly mobilizing, they all knew that extinction was inevitable without humanity coming together. If what was said by the Grand Sorcerer was true, then there isn't much time. It cannot be untrue since the Pope and Mulalin have come to lead. More than anything, Mulalin's leadership provided the major effort. The Pope, who abides by God's words, have declared a holy war, and sought support from the great city in Gunja province. He has also sent official notices to countless number of small cities in order to gather the people. An atmosphere which caused one to be treated as a pariah, should they not mobilize, or come join quickly, has been created. As if it was someone's script. Everyone was coming together like flowing rivers that merged at the sea. All this in less than a month. Stop. There came a signal from the front of the line. We'll be entering the demon god's territory. Everyone stay within the formation and do not drop your guard. The demon god's territory. The place where the demon gods and the demon tribes were running rampant. It was still a mysterious place to humans where every kind of monsters lived. It has become a forbidden place, where no one would enter, after many expeditions experienced total annihilation dozens of times in the past. Unless the expedition team was led by strong people, no one had dared to enter until now. Damn, can't believe we're at the demon god's territory. If I should die first, make sure to bury me at a sunny place. They moved forward in a somber atmosphere. They were wary of the surroundings. No one dared to let down their guard. Although there wasn't any intel about the existence of threatening monsters around here, there was so little information about what could happen here. Especially, like now. Pung, pung, pung. The earth shook. Behind a great dust storm, something was rushing towards the expeditionary force. It wasn't just one or two bodies. They were easily over 10,000. Ready for battle. Ready for battle. Tung, tung. Everyone took out their weapons. Even Kim Taehwan held his great sword as he swallowed his own dry mouth. It looks like an elaborate welcoming party. That looks like a bolter way at the front? A bolter? Fire giant? Great. Bolter were at the top of the food chain. It was a known story that the areas near where the fire giant bolter resided, other species usually got decimated. Bolters had high intelligence and as a result, they were known to be difficult adversaries. There coming at them were bolters numbered close to 10,000. Leader. Are we going to get slaughtered as soon as we got here? Humanity becomes stronger when we come together. Kim Tae-hwan let out a big breath. That was right. Humans become stronger the more they came together. It was also true that there would be more tactics available when people with specialized skills were assembled. That was certainly a difference from the other races or monsters. Humans would not be bound by the formula of 1 + 1 = 2. Therefore they built cities after coming together. Certainly, if 3 million elite troops came together, they would certainly be able to face 10,000 bolters. Although suffering casualties was inevitable, it wouldn't be too difficult to push on forward. It was then. The bolters that were rushing came to a halt right before us. As the dust settled, there was blood all over their bodies. As if they have just come from a battle. Merlin. It's good to see you again. The bolter that was at the front called out Merlin's name. Then levitating up to meet the bolter's eyes, Merlin replied with smiles. Ogre, sorry to have you come a long way. Haha. It's nothing. I've cleaned up the path that you are on, so it won't be too much trouble for you to keep going. By the way, there are so many humans. Ogre looked at the humans. The average size of a bolter was about 10 m. The scene in which 10,000 of them have gathered has never before been seen by anyone who was here. Who represents the humans? Ogre, laughing loudly, stepped forward. Flock. The Dragon Lord Hansung came down, riding Sean Dalton, the light dragon. He was wearing a golden helmet and armor for high visibility, and at his side were Sean Dalton and the demon dragon Akrisha, creating a sight to behold. I'm Hansung. A human has trained 2 dragons? Huh. And one is a dragon of light, that is known to be of high level and proud, and a demon dragon as well. The magic powers and levels of dragons were classified based on the age. Ancient dragons were at the peak. It was known that they were very rare, and one of them was stronger than 5 ordinary dragons. It was nearly impossible to train dragons, yet Hansung has trained 2 of them. I was lucky. I don't believe it was just a simple luck. At any rate. As Hansung replied humbly, Ogre formally introduced himself, despite being impressed. Glad to meet you. I'm Ogre, the leader of the bolters. It was a great big castle. As if the dwarfs have built it, the exterior of the castle was large and magnificent, and elves holding their bows were guarding the castle. The elves. The protectors of the forest. It was said that they were able to predict the trajectories of their arrows. So, if they were guarding the castle, it would be acceptable to assume that no one could enter it easily. The dwarfs and the elves are together. Kim Tae-hwan couldn't help but be amazed. The elves and the dwarfs exemplified bad blood between races. However, no sign of any bad feelings could be felt here. Most notably, the castle was enormous enough to house 3 million. It would have been impossible humans to replicate even with a massive workforce. At this level, there would be no shortcomings in calling it a city. Also notable was the orcs who were guarding the outside of the castle. Goblins and war orcs. Not just any ordinary orcs, but war orcs that were thought to have approximately the intelligence of 15-year-old humans. Having scarlet skin, it could be said that they were a race born for war. With the war orcs guarding the east of the castle while the goblins guarding the west of the castle, their presence was intimidating. Among the goblins, the shudderwalks were predominantly visible. Leader, they wouldn't suddenly feed on us, would they? I feel like I might have leaked a little. Even my manhood may shrivel. Kim Tae-hwan's subordinates were well known for their light-heartedness, yet it felt like anxiety has taken over them. That was how imposing the castle was to them. Can a castle like this be built inside the demon god's territory? Just who exactly could have done it? Who was the owner in the first place? Who was here that such a castle had been built inside the demon god's territory? Kim Tae-hwan entered the castle through the entrance. And he opened his mouth slowly. Truly, all kinds of races have gathered here. This is a dream. Huh. Everyone was out of their minds for a while. That was only expected. Elves and goblins, dwarfs, bolters, orcs and ogres were here. Even the special monsters like snowmen or lizardmen too were here, though few in number. They too were looking at the humans with fascination. However, it wasn't in a hostile or belligerent way. If it was an ordinary time, they would set perimeters and fight one another for survival. But as they came together with the same purpose, there was no look of hostility or aggression. There were some who welcomed the humans who had just entered. Welcome humans. I'm Grizinal. A smaller number than I thought. I'm Bartes. It was dignified and beautiful elf and a dwarf wearing a crown. Griznell, the queen of the elves, and Bartez, the king of the dwarfs. They were so famous even many of the humans knew of them. That was because stories about them were never omitted, always finding places in the diaries of the explorers. Good to meet you. Each city's master has come forth along with Hansung. Seo Yunhee of the Gunja province, Hyacinth, who was a Mulalin saint, came on behalf of the ailing pope, and Master Bahamut of the Radiant Guild, representing the great city. They were all the famous ones who were truly known for their power. As each representative finished short greeting, Griznell spoke with an affectionate smile. Please put down your weapons and rest. Our elves will lead you. Soon, following behind the Queen Griznell, there appeared rows of beautiful elves. As the members of the race that set the standards of beauty among the races approached with smiles, no one was unhappy. Well, resting was resting, but the leaders had things to do. As they were running short of time, they immediately held a leadership meeting. Baltan was there. I'm Baltan, the proxy of my master. Proxy? Then the territory's master is not here. Bahamut, the guild master of the Radiant Guild, asked. He wanted to see the territory's master, not the proxy who had built this type of a castle and gathered all different races. Naturally, he frowned. The master has vacated his place momentarily on another matter. Another matter? I'm amazed. Was there other matter that was more important than the war against the demon gods? It was a sarcastic remark, but Baltan did not react. The master's already on the move. He is in the midst of creating confusion among the demon gods. Then Ogre interjected. He too was also at this meeting as the representative of the bolters. Sir Ogre, the master's work is. As Baltan spoke hurriedly, Ogre nodded his head. I know. I just want everyone to know that your master is working harder than anyone in this war with the demon gods, that's all. Then the master, when will he be back? Hyacinth opened her small mouth. She came in the place of the Pope, but she knew it as soon as she arrived. This place. That the scent of him was especially strong in this castle. However, he was not here. Hyacinth wet her dry lips. It was because she was used to waiting, but she could not endure it. I do not know. The quicker we move, the sooner the master will show up. Then we'll go faster. This is a right time to discuss a healthier topic than to talk about a person who is not here. As Hyacinth smiled lightly, the atmosphere changed quickly. The power of charm that she wielded was beyond one's imagination. Both the Pope and all of Mulalin had fallen under her spell before. Furthermore, to begin with, excluding Seo Yunsi, the quiet commander, Hyacinth and others instinctively knew as to who the master of this place was. As Hansung knew it too, the work just progressed only quicker. Baltan stood up from his seat holding several marbles. First, I'll tell you about the first adversary, which is our target. As he injected magic into the marble, a shape appeared. It was a huge monster in the form of a rhinoceros. He stood on 2 feet, wore armor, and crushed a mountain. Our first target is the 40th demon god Rom. The condition of his annihilation is to destroy his city. With our unified power, Rom's city must be destroyed. Do you think that we can confront the demon god? Seo Yunsi asked this time. Baltan nodded his head. We just need to destroy the city. Then his strength will quickly dwindle. Where did that intel come from? It was discovered by Merlin and my master. Oscar, who was wearing the mask of Merlin, smiled in dry sweat. The master of this territory was Muyang. And Muyang had the knowledge of Dantalion. Muyang wanted to progress the plan by separating the demon gods who were easy to confront for them, although those demon gods were difficult for him to face. At any rate, as Merlin has notarized it, some level of faith was there. Seo Yunsi spoke in a serious tone. He will certainly try to protect the city. There were 8 demon kings under Rom. About 5 million demons reside in the city. Even though we are superior as far as the numbers go, we couldn't face them head-on. Wiping out the demon gods was the objective. It wasn't feasible to drain all their strengths in eliminating just Rom. Then, do you have another way to destroy the city? Everyone has to do the thing that everyone does best. The elves are quick in their attacks, the dwarfs are strong in launching attacks from the mid-distance, and the orcs are known for their bravery. The goblins are excellent in black arts or elemental attacks, and bolters were the giants known to be wizards of hunting. That wasn't all. Humans were best suited for instantaneous maneuvers and secret plans. Furthermore, with many skills they can provide good supporting functions. It meant that they would be incredibly effective in the guerrilla warfare, which would be conducted by maximizing the other race's specialties, and by utilizing special capabilities. It was only because they have never mobilized in such a size that if they would come together once, they would form a combination such that they would be able to confront anything. The demon races only trusted their strengths, but they most likely would not have faced so many variables like this. These variables were certainly their strongest weapon, held by everyone that has gathered in this castle. The wind blew. The dark, dead land. Countless bugs overfilled the land. They were the corpses of bugs which were spewing out toxins polluting the land. In the middle of it, a half-man, a half-beast has fallen on the ground. It was a strange life form having upper body of an elephant and the lower body of a human. A member of the coalition party. It was Bane, the 26th demon god and a part of the coalition. How did you find this place? Bane's body began disappearing as it disintegrated into powder. Having reached the extinction conditions, Bane has met the death of its flesh. Muyang and Crimson Balrog were there before him. Muyang did not respond. Instead, with the death of his flesh, the insects began to decompose. Bane's insect cave. It was the place where Bane ate his food. This too had existed in the Dantalian's memory. Although the B***starred looked like an elephant, his main diet was bugs. Hence, Bane formed insect caves at many locations where he had stored insects for food. He ate bugs 2 times a year, and those were the times in which the B***starred was vulnerable. It was the time for fulfilling the extinction condition, which was eating bugs, that took place only twice in a given year. As a result, Bane appeared at the insect caves during these times. He read it in the Dantalian's memory that Bane would appear all alone, not trusting any of his underlings. Horrible stench. Muramuru held his nose in the back. Muramuru was standing here along with Muyang in order to take care of Bane. Prisasuk. Afterwards, as Muramuru stomped on Bane's lower back, the speed at which the body turning into ashes has accelerated. You opposition cockroaches. Ball will not forgive. Bane completely disappeared not long after. Craw. Craw. Crimson Balrog pounded his own chest. Crimson Balrog did not move away from Muyang's side. Muyang had brought him along, and as a result, Crimson Balrog was helpful in the battle. The level of Crimson Balrog's powers has already risen beyond the level of a demon king. So, it was possible for him to deliver a certain level of damage to demon kings as well. Picking up a large bug from nearby, Muyang threw it into the Crimson Balrog's mouth. He eats everything. It wasn't new, but not being a finicky eater was a kind of strength, if it could be called a strength. Perhaps he might have taken it as a reward, so Crimson Balrog happily screamed even more thunderously. Balrogs have been nearly wiped out. But hard to believe that such a monster like that one was still remaining. Muramuru spoke as he nodded his head. Due to the demon gods, Balrogs have reached near extinction. By chasing the previous master of the demon world away, the demon gods have taken over. The demon kings could not kill strong Balrogs. So there were times in which the demon gods had to engage directly. Crimson Balrog. That B***starred looked to be the strongest one of them all. Finally, Muramuru looked at Muyang as if he has just come around to asking a question. But how did you know at which insect cave the B***starred would be? We could not find, even though we had tried everything. It was luck. Muyang explained tersely. And by extending his arm, he ate his fill of one of the powers of Bane. The power predator is eating Bane's power. You have absorbed insect power. Insect power is a unique power of Bane which allows for controlling insects within 100 kilometers radius, or acquire their vision. It didn't seem that useful. For a demon god, it was possible to sense the movements of insects, even those far away. It was meaningful to have eyes in many locations, but since the effective range was only 100 kilometers radius, it didn't seem that useful. Yet it would be better to have it than not. Several more windows popped up. His powers have increased as he hunted Bane. However, it was weak compared to the time when he had hunted Larigi. Bane was not a war demon god. The B***starred was an intel type. That was also the reason for Muyang to come for him. And Muramura was there with Muyang. As it was 2 against 1, it was a very easy fight. It was a good luck. Do you think that will explain it all? Muramura said, a bit taken back. Certainly being able to locate the insect caves was credited to Muyang. After locating the insect caves by applying the memory of Dantalion, and based on the traces of the insects, Muyang had instructed his underlings who specialized in stealth to investigate as to when Bane ate, and even how many times he visited in detail. After such analysis, they had come to the location with the highest probability. In fact, it was a 50/50 chance, yet it was high enough to take a bet. However, there was no need for him to explain those details to Muramuru. Muyang walked, ignoring Muramuru. Since we have taken out Bane, an intelligence agent, now is the time to cut off their legs. The demon gods were slowly mobilizing. No matter what, there would be many rumors going around. For example, the opposition has unified and the transcendental beings were gathering. This type of information would cause them to react. However, they do not know that Bei Sungmin is making moves independently. Muyang has opened up two fronts. He himself was moving with the opposition demon gods, and Bei Sungmin had been independently mobilized to unify every race. They would first launch an attack on the 40th demon god Ram. The 57th demon god Os was next, the 60th demon god Bapula. Those ones who have sided with the coalition, but did not necessarily participate in meetings or such. Of course, there would be limitations even if the races were to unite. As a result, Muyang was busy personally moving about. It was to cause confusion by cutting intel transmission lines, so that good information did not get passed on. There was a limitation though. Muyang stealthily raised his head. Muramuru. He has been chosen as Muyang's shadow. No matter how much Muyang had made his presence felt, there was a need for insurance. However, Muyang wasn't a dumb person to let him know that he knew he was being watched. Hence he was maintaining a sufficient distance. At any rate, Bane was causing a lot of headache for us. Since he has been disintegrated, even our opponents will feel the heat. Muramuru laughed quietly, as if he was truly happy. However, Muyang wasn't sure whether Muramuru was part of the anti-coalition faction, or not. Muramuru, Gremory, Fornius, Citri, Asmodeus. One of these was definitely a spy. Might be more than one. Muyang must prevent passing of more than the absolutely necessary intel to them. For example, like Bei Sungmin's mission or information about Muyang's powers. He must not have noticed my preying on Bane's powers. Muyang was studying Muramuru's reactions. He felt it since the time when he had absorbed Laraji's power of divinity that they didn't seem to know that Muyang could prey on powers. This was an important intel. That was because it meant that Muyang could use the powers whenever he needed to by hiding the act of using those stolen powers. It was then. Muramuru raised his right hand. He was able to communicate with any person tattooed with a certain glyph by raising his right hand, no matter how far away that person was. It was a highly useful ability in transmitting the intel that was gathered from watching over Muyang. There would be no better tool for a spy than this ability. Soon he lowered his hand and Muramuru spoke. Gremory has disintegrated Phoenix. Phoenix. The 37th demon god. He was the demon god that was in charge of strategy. It seemed that the simultaneous attack by 4 demon gods, including Gremory, was successful in destroying him. For now, the first step in the plan was going well. The initial attack was successful. The problem was from there on. At this time, 3 coalition demon gods have been annihilated. The moment that this was learned, they would hurriedly assemble. They would plan retaliation and would mobilize to destroy the opposition. Paimon's a concern. There was one more demon god who, along with Bane, was gathering and delivering intel. Paimon. The one who reveals secrets. However, there was no way to know what he looked like. Even Dantalion didn't seem to know much about Paimon. That was an indication as to how skilled he was in moving about undetected. The worst-case scenario. The possibility that Paimon, in which he might have told Baal about the annihilation of Bane and Phoenix, must be put on the table. Baal would gather his allies and first attack Gremory, who was the face of the opposition. He would want to take care of things quickly, now when the whereabouts of Solomon was not known. We are definitely in the position of the minority attacking the majority. There could never be a situation in which attacks are launched against the same or more number of demon gods. Even a single casualty on the opposition forces could become fatal. Hence, they must only engage in the fights in which victory was guaranteed. Muyang stroked his chin. The best move that Muyang could make if and when Baal was to mobilize after hearing from Paimon. Toss a bait. They could never exclude Solomon. Gremory. She would become the bait. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. In the middle of the demon god's territory. The land of death where there were endless lightning and storms. The temple of Baal, the first one, was there. At the temple in the sky, which can only be reached by climbing up tens of thousands of stairs, Baal was acting as the controller of all things as he looked down on the world. During ordinary times there wouldn't be anyone else but Baal. However, now there were several coalition demon gods who were seeking his audience. Baal. Seated on the seat of great power, he looked down upon the demon gods who were looking up as they knelt. Paimon was there as well. He was before Baal in his true flesh, rather than in his spiritual form. Oh Baal, the opposition is mobilizing in earnest. I've confirmed Bane's demise. Is it only Bane? As if he already knew everything. As his piercing eyes looked deeper into Paimon's mind, Paimon paused for a moment before continuing. Mobilizations of Gremory and the opposition demon gods have been confirmed. The anticipated destination is believed to be where Phoenix is. We won't be able to defeat them. I concur. Baal was certain of Phoenix's demise. However, Baal did not take his eyes off of Paimon. Paimon, isn't there something that you're hiding? I'm not hiding anything. I know of your limitations. You're not able to reveal a deity's secret. However, if it concerns him, you must tell me. The reference to him was Solomon. His whereabouts cannot be located. Paimon immediately replied as if he had prepared it in advance. Solomon. Paimon was watching him. However, he could not talk about it easily. If he was to talk about Solomon, he must also talk about the fight with Kingslayer, and naturally the subject of Solomon being kept in time would be known. Should he reveal that kind of secrets, Paimon would not be able to prolong his own existence. And he has decided that it wasn't something to be mentioned unless he was absolutely certain. Solomon knew that Paimon was watching him. That itself could be a trap. I trust you. Baal moved his eyes away from Paimon. Although he said that he trusted him, was he really trusting Paimon? Paimon denied it internally. As Paimon did not trust Baal and other demon gods, he too would not be trusted by anyone. However, he could not verbalize it. Baal. For he was a true god. Like Solomon. Then Baal looked on other demon gods. There gathered a total of 11 demon gods at the temple. It would take a while for everyone to gather, but this was a good number for the task. The opposition's attack is already expected. As he has appeared, he would be in contact with the opposition party. And it also implies that he is not yet whole. That is Solomon. The demon gods showed nervous expressions. Solomon. They knew of his powers better than anyone else. However, Baal, who was before them, was also an equally powerful being. He is not completely free from limitations of Lemegeton. It is likely that he is still hiding with Diablo. He must certainly be near Gremory. What Baal said was absolutely true. That was because even Paimon discovered Solomon while watching Gremory. Find him. And finish him. The demon gods lowered their heads. Then they instantaneously vanished. Baal's words were absolute. As soon as he said something, it had to be done. However, one of them still remained. Paimon, is there something you want to say? The mobilizations of the transcendental beings seem serious. I've heard that the King of the North has gone into Gremory's camp. That's not all. The King of the Dragons, the Child of the Moon, and the Masters of the Mountains are all moving independently. The transcendental beings that ruled over everywhere were also threats to demon gods. Therefore they were always being kept on watch. Were the transcendental beings influenced by his words also? No. There is another one who is mobilizing them. Another one? Paimon took a deep breath. This too was one of the big secrets, as it was the same email protected that had attacked him. It meant that he was at the level of deity, and further, it was believed that he even made contact with the Masters of the Darkness. By revealing this, Paimon would be immobilized for at least a month. However, it was an unavoidable sacrifice that he had to make in order to avoid Baal's suspicion. Muyang, do you know that name? At this time, there were 300,000 troops under Muyang's command. With the King of the Dead joining, he has gathered strong reinforcements and a great army. That number was close to 5 million, but they were following the orders of the King of the Dead, not Muyang. Even if the dead were in Muyang's army, there was a slight, yet a significant difference. Speed was critical in any war, especially when it came to a war with the demon gods. Therefore, there was a small difference in the utilization of this army that required another layer of command, from those who could be immediately mobilized with a single direct order. The King of the Dead was surprised. A tent was pitched in grand scale. Muyang was using his magic to block off anyone who might be listening. That was how dangerous what Muyang was about to do was. Those demon gods that are after Gremory. You have to stop some of them. In the meantime, I'll attempt to reconcile with one of them. You say it as if that was so easy. The King of the Dead scoffed. A strategy to reconcile with one of the invading demon gods? Although it was a difficult task, it would be incredibly beneficial should it succeed. Even if the King of the Dead was strong enough to take on one demon god, it was just obvious that there would be at least 7 demon gods that would be attacking. Both Muyang and the King of the Dead would be in danger. It's not impossible to do. Muyang shrugged his shoulders. He was at a disadvantage, but it wasn't that there was not a way. Do you have a plan? I've identified the spy that was leaking information to the coalition. Muyang has been watching and investigating from both inside and outside of the anti-coalition camp. In other words, Muyang had been investigating everyone, not just the ones watching him. The only objective of Muyang was to track down the spy. That was, those who were playing both sides against each other by providing intel to both the coalition and the anti-coalition demon gods in order to preserve themselves. Are you going to detain the bastard? If he realizes that we know the identity, he will immediately go and defect to the coalition. What was important was that the identity of the spy has been uncovered. However, he wasn't about to let them know that. The effect would be maximized by playing dumb, leaking false information to set a trap for the coalition. So who is that spy? All 4 demon gods except Gremory. What? The King of the Dead heaved out a sigh. That was right. Gremory. With the exception of her, everyone was a traitor. Although Muyang had his suspicions, he didn't think that it would turn out to be all 4 of them. However, after having watched over them, he found that all 4 of them had contacted coalition agents. Even they would not be able to deny it, other than argue how severe was their betrayal of the anti-coalition faction. It was as if Gremory was engaged in a lonely battle by herself. Gremory was expendable. Even the King of the Dead understood the reality of the situation. He also got it from what he has been hearing. This was also true. Without the appearances of Muyang and Solomon, Gremory would have become prey for Hors and Largy. Immediately after that, those remnant anti-coalition members would defect to the coalition. The fact that they still remained here proved they were still weighing their options and calculating their possible benefits and penalties based on the current situation. As a result, they weren't all in on the invasion. They also did not show much opposition when Muyang said that he was using Gremory as bait. So, do we need our own spy in return? If that was the case, I would hope for an influential demon god. How are you going to leak information that would put them in disarray? We will have to use Solomon. Solomon would make an entrance. Of course, he would not be making a true appearance, but by simply leaking that information, the enemy's mobilization would be severely hampered. There would be less and less of them that would take the lead. This scenario would be perfect for this situation. I have no fear of the likes of the demon gods. However, it is a risky gamble. He knew what the risks were. He wanted to learn what he didn't understand about the art of death through Muyang. But Muyang was standing on a very treacherous slope. With the slightest misstep he would fall off the cliff. However, Muyang was confident. Even if he wasn't confident, he had to appear confident. That was the position that Muyang was in. You have no answers. The King of the Dead shook his head as he realized that Muyang did not have an answer. Certainly, without such audacity he would not have been able to train the Crimson Balrog. But then why are you still hiding your powers? Hiding my powers? Muyang asked as if he didn't understand what the King of the Dead was talking about. I know the secret as I have learned the same powers. Do you not have 4 wings? It was a pointed question. Muyang had 3 pairs of wings to start with. Although he had 6 wings, the demon gods only knew of 4 wings. Muyang did not trust anyone from the get-go. Even when he met Gremory and when he went to rescue her. He had even hidden the last 2% of his powers even at the very dangerous time when he was fighting Largy. It was because that was the only way that he could survive. It was because that was the only way that he could change the future. He must not show all his cards. Muyang only had a subtle smile. The King of the Dead clicked his tongue. You are the first one that I've ever seen to be more sly than I. Having received the order to annihilate Gremory, 11 demon gods were mobilizing rapidly. The one that led them from the front was Amon, the 7th-ranked demon god. He was the demon god called the creator of magic and the original master of Enroth. Born with the mystic eyes that could analyze anything, and being a cruel tyrant, even the other demon gods were uncomfortable around him. He was even in a worse temper these days. He even controls Enroth's mind. Who is that bastard? According to the intel from the spy, it was said that Enroth was under Muyang's control. It must have been true, as no one would be mistaken about Enroth, who was the demon god of iron. In fact, the linkage that was felt from Enroth had at some point disappeared. He broke the Heia's spell that I had placed. Enroth was one of the strongest demon gods. Certainly, from Amon's perspective, he had no choice but to place a strong Heia's spell or someone like that. However, Muyang had destroyed that Heia's spell and taken control of Enroth's mind. Could this really have happened? He was curious. Even if he had learned all the schools of magic, mind control was a very different and separate field. Even Amon could not control the mind of other demon gods that were under his command. Hence he has joined in this expedition. Only for the purpose of seeing the one called Muyang. The intention was to, if possible, verify the mind control skill and take it from him. At that moment, one of the small tattoos on his left hand turned blue-green. An intel has arrived from Muramuru. Amon's spy was Muramuru. He was the double agent that Amon had planted. He even heard the stories of Muyang from him. As he allowed the call by using his magic, the information that Muramuru has sent naturally entered Amon's mind. Gremory and Solomon will meet? Should Solomon appear, Diablo would be with him. Of course, Amon was not scared of Diablo. Furthermore, Baal has said that Solomon would not be able to use his powers. That's strange. However, for Solomon to be meeting Gremory was strange, especially in such a time. It was strange to beg for mercy from Solomon to begin with. Eliminate Baal by being on the side of the anti-coalition? Solomon was an absolute, faultless executioner. He had the heart of steel that showed no blood or tear. Amon knew him well. No matter on which side it is, it was rather an opportune time. But if it was the truth, Amon has decided that it would be the best chance to overcome the terror of Solomon. If Diablo could be eliminated, Solomon's influence would decrease tremendously. Even if it was not true, Gremory's destruction has been predicted. However, it must not be the same case for others. Amon, it seems as if it would be necessary to reorganize the ranks. We will rest here for a while before moving forward. Bodis, the 17th-ranked demon god, came forth first. It seemed as if he wanted to stay at the back and assess the situation. Certainly it seemed like we might have moved too fast. We also need some time if we wanted to capture Gremory for sure. Nibirius. Click. Amon clicked his tongue. You foolish ones. It was obvious that spies were planted on the anti-coalition side. They probably heard about the appearance of Solomon at the same time, so it just meant that they didn't want to be at the front. They were the definition of what cowardice was. Although 11 demon gods have been dispatched with Amon, there were, in the end, only 5 demon gods along with Amon that would take the lead in capturing Gremory. The remaining 7 of them went to the back by making up all sorts of excuses. They only wanted to preserve themselves, yet it seemed quite pathetic. Just exactly how long will they fear Solomon? Perhaps they might be deifying Solomon way too much. The one who had thrown them out into this world and destroyed their birthplace. Amon continued as he stood at the front of the pack. We will destroy Gremory as we have planned. There will be no mercy. Tong. Tong. Tung. The king of the dead was stomping the ground with his staff at the top of a tall mountain. A strange sound resonated each time his staff hit the ground. 5. He felt the 5 demon gods approaching from afar. He also felt the millions of demons that were approaching with them. Even if for the king of the dead he couldn't battle against 5 demon gods at the same time. The troops that he had under his command could not overcome the sheer numbers. However, buying time and disrupting the enemy was a possibility. As he hit the ground with his staff again, the surrounding scenery changed. Shwing. There came a snowstorm. A countless number of snow-capped mountains were bending and bending again. Limited force projection. The king of the dead was the king of the north. He has ruled as a king for a long time. There was no one who could withstand his powers in the snows of the north. That was in the past, is at present, and will be in the future. Come. I will show you the true king that brings forth the power of death. The king moved with the powerful storm. Beyond sight, the king of the dead was fighting. By placing a shield, he was preventing the demons from going beyond the area. Truly impressive. Gremory let out a silent admiration. The transcendental beings. It was certainly the power that fit that name. He was holding up against the 5 demon gods by himself. He would not be able to win. However, Muyang was pessimistic. The king of the dead. He was strong, but there were too many enemies. He would be buying time at best. We'll be focusing our attacks to those that may escape the shield. Do not let down your guards. Focus. There were about 3 million troops around Gremory. Most of them were under the command of Gremory. The other anti-coalition demon gods took a step back by saying that they would support remotely, from the back. Perhaps if they were to sense victory, they would quickly appear for the benefits. On the other hand, if they were to sense defeat, they would likewise disappear quickly like ghosts. Only Muyang joined in. Even Gremory must have sensed that everyone else, other than her, was acting as a spy. Or she might have known it for a long time. Perhaps that was why Gremory's eyes softened further as she looked on Muyang. Have you ever justified yourself in face of certain defeat? She asked Muyang. Come to think of it, Gremory's defeat has always been certain. She had lost in the past and also because the coalition had annihilated humanity. However, Muyang shook his head. No. You are strong. You are strong too. Muyang briefly replied. If Muyang was strong, then so was Gremory. She did not give up until the end. Muyang knew that too well. Gremory put on a small smile. Thank you. It is too early to be thanking me. Chijik. Right then. Someone has forcefully torn up the shield. A shield with such power and scale was being shattered at will. There were only a limited number of demon gods that could wield such power. And Gremory opened her mouth as she stared at the very first one that came through the shield. Amon. Amon. The ruler of all magic. The top-ranked demon god who holds the 7th seat. Muyang paused for a moment. It's because not even Muyang had expected him to show up. The top demon gods are not good at cooperating with each other. Why was he here? If there is something that weighed on Amon's mind, it is Inroth. Inroth was originally the king of the demons under the command of Amon. Muyang had lifted a spell that Amon casted on Inroth, by turning him undead. There's no way that Amon, the magic ruler, could fail to notice it. Moreover, other informers may have told him that Inroth was obeying Muyang. Although this development was predicted, the timing was earlier than expected. Amon is aiming for me. Muyang summed up his thoughts. If the first opponent is Amon, this would be beyond his capabilities. To be honest, Amon is one of the worst opponents. In Dantalian's memories, Amon played the role of a strategic coordinator. It means he had the role of directing Baal and other demon gods. He was recognized for his excellent skills, and not even Dantalian knew Amon's ability. Honestly, there were too many unknowns. It will be a bad match. Will you give up? Muyang snapped bitterly at Gremory. Gremory was well aware of the power of Amon. Numerous demons rushed to block the demon god who had torn the barriers created by the King of Death, but a huge explosion occurred when Amon just crooked a finger. Like moths rushing a bonfire, the demons fell in shower of bodies, blood and body parts. He'll get here. 5 minutes will be enough. Gremory shook his head. Amon is one of Baal's closest allies. If we can beat him, it will certainly suppress the action of the coalition. You are optimistic. I don't want to lose. Gremory clasped her hands. Unlike when she fought Larigi, she is recovered now. Zwang. Zwang. Zuha. All the demons under Gremory's command are covered with a pink shield. And a huge statue of the demon goddess appeared on the ground in front of Gremory. At the same time, Amon's attack weakened. I created a barrier to minimize magic power. This is all I can do. She said it as if it was nothing, but it was great enough. Amon, the founder of magic. His magic power figures would easily exceeded 1,000. Not just 1,000. If Muyang's instincts are correct, it actually exceeds 1,500. Amon is really the highest level of demon god. But Gremory was coping with it. Although it didn't have much effect, it was true that Amon's attacks were significantly reduced. Even though she had put mana barriers on millions of their forces. It was an operation beyond common sense. It is amazing no matter how many times Muyang saw it. However, Myung can't sit back and wait. Taken. I'm gonna send you in. Taken stood with confidence. He seems to know what roles he should do. Taken, who rode the bone dragon, looked as if he could be called a dragon knight. Block the breach with the crimson balrog. We need to plug the gap so that the shields of the king of the dead wouldn't be broken. How long can barriers stop the demon gods? Sure to break. It was a matter of time. What Myung can do is to delay the time as much as possible. So they should isolate Amon and try to win. Okay. Taken flew on the bone dragon. Crimson Balrog glanced Myung and flapped his wings. Myung spread out his 4 wings. He took out Gabriel's spear and separated out the power of Lucifer. And there was a something that he felt when he concentrated on this task. Paimon. It was the similar feeling he had felt in the battle with Larrigi before. Like someone is spying him. Paimon is the only one having a skill like this. Perhaps the reason why this immense host quickly reached this place was because of Paimon. Then there was a possibility that this fight would also reach Baal's ears. What should he do? Should he remove Paimon's spy first? It was impossible to deal negligently with Amon. Maybe this was finally the time to use the skills Myung had kept hidden as trump cards. But it's strange. The movement of Paimon's spy was strange. He wasn't looking at Myung. He wasn't looking Gremory, his opponents, or even Amon. What he's looking at is something farther away. He was watching something that even Myung couldn't detect. So even though Myung was able to detect his magical spying, Paimon wasn't aware the spy was being spied on. Myung turned his eyes to the place where Paimon's spy was looking. He closed his eyes, broadened his sense more and accepted the surroundings completely. And he found. There was another one watching this war the same as Paimon. In exquisite irony, the information sown to confuse their enemies became the truth. Solomon. He was here. Myung's face became stern. Worms. How dare they? The city of Loim, the demon god of 40th seat, began to burn. In other words, the conditions of his extinction, destruction of his city has been achieved. At the moment, Loim's influence diminished. Loim and his demons have become weaker. Loim and his army, who had been crushing mountains, began to pull back little by little. However, the allied forces who had declared a holy war wasn't in good condition either. Huff, damn it. There's no end. Ah. It was a battlefield full of curses, screams, and swords tearing the flesh. All were out of their minds. Because of too many deaths. However, there were always more to kill. Loim wasn't just being beaten. I'll kill you all. I'm gonna show you what the true destroyer is. No matter how weak he is, Loim is a demon god. There was an earthquake when he struck the ground. Thump, thump, thump. Baong. No one could stop Loim's rush in the shape of a giant rhino. Loim's charge was capable of collapsing buildings. Someone caught under his pad feet was crushed into paste. Crazy rhinoceros. Stop him. Do something. Although the city was destroyed, there were too few who could directly confront the demon god. The absence of someone truly strong. However, Merlin and Hansung were facing Loim. Leader. Avoid. Huff. Kim Tae-hwan raised his willpower to the limit. It is unknown how many demons he killed. He gave up counting at over 100. He felt like the saliva in his mouth has dried up and eyes were being plucked out. And he thought he'd be finished soon. A rhino-shaped Loim was rushing toward Kim Tae-hwan. It's hard to avoid. It's like a slow motion. And instinctively he felt death. Can't be avoided. In front of sure death he smiled. I wanted to see it once more. Suddenly he remembered the time when he was in the Blue Temple. The relationships he made there still remained deep in Tae-hwan's memory. If he could meet them again, he would brag that he'd changed a lot and he became the vice master of a prominent guild with his efforts. Many things have changed since Tae-hwan became the vice master of his guild. It has improved greatly by kicking out the corrupt, generously supporting the recruits with potential, and helping to change the attitudes of the great city itself. Rotten vested interests. He'd stood against them. As promised to Myung to show everyone, Kim Tae-hwan had gone his own way. Myung was correct. Tae-hwan is a hero. He is a hidden contributor. But is it too early to taste the glory? Thump, thump, thump. Baong. Loim rushed toward him. Tae-hwan gripped his sword with the last of his last strength. I will not just die. He will be seen fighting until the end. It's unfair to end by just giving up. But when Loim closed to Taehwan, he stopped. Loim stopped and looked up at the sky. At the same time, the sun was obscured. The deep darkness. The moon rose. What happened? Why is it suddenly? The sun disappeared. What the hell is that? What is that thing? While everyone was making a fuss, there was a huge thing coming through the darkness. It was shaped like a dragon, but the size wasn't comparable to a normal dragon. It's just filled the sky. He is coming. Han Sung smiled, wiping his bloody lips with his hand. The king of dragons. He finally showed up. But he wasn't alone. Isn't he only in the early teens now? Next to him there was a boy or a girl with blue eyes and hair. The eyes seemed to have frost without emotion and no one knew the reason. It was creepy just watching it. And the child of the moon. Han Sung knelt in the middle of the war. The child of the moon. One of the 4 transcendents who rule the world. A power that had never been seen before and veiled in secrets. But now its presence appeared with the king of dragons. That's not all. Countless dragons following the king of dragons. Numerous spirits following the child of the moon. They attacked Loim and his underlings. Arg ha. Do you think I'll lose? Loim shrieked. But with their appearance the battlefield was sharply tilted. Loim, weakened by the completion of the extinction conditions, couldn't fight all of them. Allied forces were dumbfounded for a moment. What's that? Are they our forces? What's going on here? Haezong approached to the dragons immediately. And he sheathed his sword and spoke with courtesy. Thank you for your decision, your majesty, and thank you, my lord child of the moon. The king of dragons didn't answer. Instead, the child of the moon opened his mouth. Where is Muyang? What? He isn't here. We have to go to him. It will be too late if he meets Solomon. Han Sung tilted his head. The child of the moon. He shouldn't feel any emotions from the child, but he seemed anxious. Could you tell me the reason? The angel of Solomon taken away by Baal. It is in Muyang. The angel? The child closed his eyes and said, if Solomon recovers that angel, Solomon is complete. Then the world will be over. Asterisk. Solomon tilted his head. This is because there was one thing that caught the eye, even though he reached here while trying to figure out the movements of the demon gods. It's strange. Almost nothing could attract this much of his attention. Neither Amon nor Gremory received the attention of Solomon. But strangely enough, the winged guy was interesting. Solomon looked up the sky. Stars. The stars are moving. The stars are moving with him in the center. The guide of the stars. Come to think of it, Kingslayer was looking at the stars. Kingslayer wasn't an emotional person. But when he saw the stars, he was acting as if he felt hope. Why he did do. That's him. Solomon was sure. Kingslayer's hope was that winged guy. But it was disappointing. By the strength he could feel, it was like a high-level demon god. But then he can never reach Solomon. In addition, there were so many disparate energies felt. In short, it's just an assortment. Solomon has also never met the one in full of chaos like that. Kingslayer, the hope you've seen and believed in is really poor. What would Kingslayer have felt if that hope was lost? Solomon reached out his hand. If he had been able to exert a proper influence in this world, he could have gotten rid of him right now. Unfortunately, however, more intervention than necessary was impossible. He's the guide of the stars. He had the divinity and carried the stars. It means that he was recognized in this world, so Solomon couldn't deal with him now. It would be possible to intervene with Diablo, but he didn't want to show up on this battlefield. The guide of the stars was lucky. Then Solomon looked at him again. He almost missed it, but no matter how he looked, it was strange. That's the power of chaos. A human being can handle it. Besides that, humans' time flow was very heterogeneous. The axis of time is working differently. Not right now, but Solomon was able to even manipulate time in the past. Of course, it means that he can also recognize the heterogeneity of time. Solomon's eyes turned black eventually. Thus, Solomon could even see the soul. And found. Solomon was shuddering like someone who found something important that was lost long ago. It was the spirit that had been taken away by Baal and he couldn't find where it was. Polina, my angel. An angel who had helped Solomon manipulate time. The angel was with Muyang. He didn't know what happened, but it was clear. And if he can get the angel back, he doesn't have to bother with Diablo. He could make this world a pile of ashes right now. Kingslayer. Is that what you believed in? Solomon was fascinated. And soon he smiled and opened his mouth. I'll have to get it back. Because Aeolus Polina, it was originally his angel. It was supposed to be a tactic to confuse and shake the enemy troops. The disinformation succeeded in restricting their movements and sowing chaos among the enemy ranks. However, if the false information became real, it would become a problem. I am not yet prepared. Baal and Solomon are the two great peak existences. They had to be faced last after finishing everything else. Muyang had been doing everything he could to make this happen. He had hit his forces, dispersed it, moved them separately to attack the enemies in converging columns. Of course, the downside in this situation was that Muyang's forces couldn't be concentrated immediately. One thing was sure. Facing Solomon in this state was a bad idea. Moreover, Muyang and Dantalion did not know much about Solomon. Did he have an annihilation condition, or did it even exist? Muyang could not make a move without knowing. He thought about Amon's attack, Paimon's intentions, and the risk posed by Solomon. Only Muyang was aware of Solomon since Paimon remained a bystander even now. A broken bicycle. The thought popped to Muyang's head. Muyang had started off running and then just kept sprinting. He faced demon gods and moved on before their supporters sensed Muyang. He had no brakes and didn't even think of stopping. It was like a broken bicycle, and Muyang had only pumped the pedals recklessly. So were the results showing now? There may be side effects to his blitzkrieg tactics. He had thought that these things could happen. Eating fast may upset your stomach, but Muyang just didn't have the time. His supporters and allies would become more stable as time passed. If the opposition was in disarray due to his tactics, they immediately collected their strength and swept the field. EP. The eating reference is in Guderian's theories about blitzkrieg. Rapid-fire conquest without digesting the occupied territories could lead to unrest and uprisings. Since Muyang knew what could happen, he operated quickly. He managed to use luck, skill, and other elements to cover what he could not prepare to come here. However, Muyang was not at all prepared to face Solomon. Not one thing was ready yet. Something is being prepared. Also, Muyang instinctively felt danger and that Solomon had discovered something. His instincts shouted to escape. But there was something strange. If Solomon, who even the demon gods feared, wanted something from Muyang, he only had to take it. However, Solomon did not try to harm Muyang immediately. He was probably preparing to summon Diablo. Solomon is unable to use his powers fully in this world yet. Muyang remembered Gremory's words. If Solomon could use his powers, he wouldn't need to summon Diablo. Then, Solomon cannot attack me directly. Muyang made a tentative conclusion. However, it was still dangerous if Diablo was summoned. Even Baal was wary of Diablo, and it was impossible for Muyang to face him alone. However, there was still time. What is wrong? Gremory asked in a tired voice. She seemed surprised that Muyang was not moving. Muyang thought over what should be done first and decided. Watch your back. Back? He is here. He is. Solomon. Gremory flinched. Her pupils dilated and she seemed to be astonished. However, she had met Solomon once before. It might be possible for Gremory to buy them some time rather than Muyang, who had never faced him before. If that was not even feasible, they had to move quickly. But he kicked the ground and jumped. Muyang stretched his wings wide and pierced the sky. He left behind a contrail as he flew to where Amon was. There were thundering and crashing sounds. Scenes of massacre surrounded Amon. Massive storm clouds scattered searingly bright lightning, and Amon was rapid-firing massive fireballs with both hands. He summoned typhoons of wind blades to shred the demons flying at him by the dozens. Hundreds of demons died whenever one of his spells shrieked. At least among Muyang's troops, Crimson Balrog and Taken were tanking the front line, supported by Gremory's protection shield so enemies could not break the line. However, Amon was showing to the battlefield why he was one of the seven. Amon is the master of magic. If he feared Solomon, he must have researched a solution. Muyang was convinced that this was true. Magic was mystery, and someone who wields mystery should not surrender to it. Solomon was the mystery itself, and to Amon he was someone to overcome. If Muyang managed to bring Amon in, it might be possible. But how? Domination is difficult. Muyang had planned to dominate at first. However, Solomon's actions were ominous. If Muyang used too much of his strength, his efforts could lead to disaster. Muyang drew grief. With a low ringing sound, he let it wail and slashed sideways at Amon. The black thunderbolt flew straight to Amon with a violent crash. Amon grabbed it with his hands. It was a fantastic sight. Amon had grabbed a writhing black thunderbolt, using the gloves on his hands. Those gloves are made for magic control. Muyang knew that with a single exchange. Those gloves suited Amon due to their immense capability. Muyang could not believe Amon had caught the black thunderbolt. Amon threw the black thunder back at Muyang. With a thundering roar, Muyang was target with his own attack. Muyang raised grief and sliced the black thunder into two. He was able to manage this because the first attack had not been his most powerful attack. If Muyang had shot the black thunderbolt at maximum and Amon had reflected it, he could not have sliced it so easily. So, you are Muyang? Amon stared at Muyang with an intrigued face. Muyang only stared back silently. How did you remove my geis and control and wrath? Don't you know already? It was simple. It was because Muyang's power, the power of his authority, was stronger. Amon also knew that. He had asked the question because he did not want to acknowledge this fact. Muyang had touched Amon's nerve. Well, I don't. But... Amon dusted off his hands once and transparent wind blades formed around Muyang. There had to be at least 10,000 of them. Muyang was impressed that he could form an overwhelming attack with simple gesture. I don't think I will lose. With a whipping sound, Muyang dodged in between the blades. However, he could not avoid them all. He stretched his wings and held the lance of Gabriel. Muyang had separated Lucifer and Gabriel's powers. As he swung his lance, the heightened wind pressure pushed the closest blades away from him. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. 128. He accelerated sequentially rather than all at once. Muyang's speed increased exponentially, and when he accelerated 128 times, he could escape from the blade's storm. However, Amon was the master of magic. He had already implemented his next move the moment he felt something was wrong. Vapor explosion. Countless water drops filled the air. Amon added his magic to the tiny particles of water that could not be seen by the eye, magically separating the oxygen and hydrogen to make explosives. Muyang was at a disadvantage because no matter how fast he accelerated, there were no gaps in the explosive fog. I'm doing it anyway. He could retreat. However, Muyang pushed through. Acceleration was not a skill that could be used for long. Moreover, he had to finish this battle with Amon as quickly as possible. Muyang's goal was to reach him. He just needed to touch him to take the next step. With a whirring noise, the water drops began to spin. While they looked like slow motion to Muyang, the problem was that there was no gap in the coverage. Muyang covered himself with his wings and flew across the air. With blasting noises, explosions followed Muyang everywhere. Muyang's black wings became tattered. If it was a normal wound, Muyang could heal with holy blessing, but Amon's magic was strange. It adhered to Muyang's body to block regeneration or healing. He attacked my weakest points. Muyang could not expect constant regeneration like when he was attacked by the Crimson Balrog. However, Amon was nearby. Amon sensed that Muyang was coming at lightning speed. He made his next move in a flash. Crunch. Muyang twisted his leg as an ice lance had pierced it. While pain rolled into him, Muyang did not try to remove the lance. He shrunk the space between them again to approach Amon. Muyang grabbed Amon's shoulders and cancelled his acceleration. It was not for attack. It will open to those who knock. It was Ars Nova, the book containing the language of miracles. Amon's eyes shook when he heard the prayer. How do you know that prayer? No one believed that the self-named Archangel had the Ars Nova. Amon did not believe it, but now he knew it was true. Did Ars Nova also lift the geis from Enroth? Amon tried to resist, but Muyang was a step faster. Light flooded from Muyang's eyes and connected with Amon's. This prayer performed the miracle of opening someone's soul. Even though it mercilessly drained him, Muyang braced himself. I see it. Muyang saw Amon's soul. They were now connected as Muyang opened the door. Muyang then entered the real battle. Art of Death. It was not to make Amon an undead, which was impossible in the first place. No one with divinity could become undead. Since an undead is an incomplete being, it is incompatible with a divine being who aims for perfection. So why was this a fight? It had to do with Amon's annihilation condition. Amon has to be involved in a phenomenon he cannot understand. Amon is the master of magic and has perfect confidence in himself. Therefore he tries to understand and solve everything. This is how he earned the title Master of Magic. Ars Nova? While it was called the miraculous prayer, it was still an extension of magic. Amon could understand this phenomenon. However, if Amon was ruled even for a moment by the power Muyang wielded, Amon would be truly connected with Muyang at that moment and would taste the chaos in Muyang. He would not be able to understand at all who Muyang is and how Muyang ruled over him. The art of death infiltrates the demon god, Amon. Amon does not become undead. However, art of death is a ruling force. It infiltrates Amon even faster. Demon god, Amon, is aggressively resisting. It only needed to work for a moment for less than 1/10 of a second. Muyang had to rule over Amon for that time. It was Muyang's last desperate gamble made with his final trump card, the spell of Ars Nova, and the only hope he had in this inescapable situation. It was a battle of wills and Muyang began to shed bloody tears. Blood flowed from every orifice he had. Muyang's soul was much weaker than a demon god's soul, and Amon as a seeker had a much firm soul than other demon gods. Is it impossible? Muyang was losing the battle of wills and he clenched his teeth. He could not step back. Souls were striking against each other dangerously, and Muyang's soul might disintegrate under the onslaught. However, at that moment where their souls are almost intermingled, Amon's expression changed. Time. Amon seemed astonished even more than he did when Muyang used Ars Nova. However, this change made a crack, and Muyang's soul rose up to win within the time necessary for a single heartbeat. You succeeded in ruling demon god, Amon. However, you are not in complete control over him. Effective for 7 seconds. Amon was under Muyang's control for 7 seconds. His eyes clouded for a moment. I did it. Muyang rushed to the next step. 7 seconds were more than the time he had expected. It was enough to carve an absolute mandate on his soul, although Muyang could not use a command Amon would resist instinctively. Only act for yourself. Muyang's words implied that Amon was the master of magic, who analyzed and solved all. If things were normal, he would never follow anyone, fear anyone, and would walk for only his own good. Only act for yourself. Muyang had removed the bolt that locked what Amon had unconsciously wanted, so it would be enough.